Hi members, we're now streaming live. So if I can welcome everybody to this meeting of East Cambridgeshire District Council, and for those of members of the public and press who are watching online, if the stream does go down, we will pause to see if we can get it up again. So hopefully that won't happen this evening, but please bear with us if that does. The first item I've got is rather a sad, two pieces of sad information, in that the death of former councillor Chris Morris, who was the district councillor for the Dullingham wards from 2011 to 2019, and also the former councillor Geoffrey Woolard, who was the district councillor for the Bodisham ward from 1985 to 1991. I would like to say a few words initially about Chris. I took over representing the Dullingham villages. Obviously, we had the boundary reorganisation in 2019, but the villages that Chris represented of Dullingham, Stetchworth, which is my home village, and Wood Ditton were his. He was a conscientious councillor for those 8 years and supported his parish councils with a great deal of diligence. And as I discovered at his funeral, he was involved in many activities around the area. And also, as I discovered at his funeral, he grew up about 5 miles from where I lived, just on the west side of London, but our paths never crossed. But so I do commend our thoughts to Chris, but I know Councillor Bailey wants to say a few words about him as well.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I was incredibly saddened to hear of the untimely death of Chris, who, as you say, served as a Conservative councillor for Dullingham villages here at the council from 2011 to 2019. I was also pleased to attend Chris's funeral. There was a huge turnout, and it was testament to the multitude of organisations and clubs and charities that Chris was involved in, that so many people turned out to his funeral. Chris gave freely and very generously of his time and his energy and his accountancy expertise to dozens and dozens of good causes. It was truly astonishing to hear the amount of activities that he was involved in. He certainly wasn't known for his timekeeping, but Chris was known for his keen interest in a very wide range of activities and his generosity to all of them. He will be sorely missed, I know, and we send our grateful thanks and our condolences from this council to his wife, Ros, and his family.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Christine Ambrose-Smith.
I had the pleasure of working alongside Chris for a couple of years, and I echo everything that's been said. He was a very kind and generous man, and you know, he was sadly missed.
Thank you for that. There's nobody else wishes to speak in respect of Councillor Morris, ex-Councillor Morris. In terms of Councillor Geoffrey Woolard, I did meet him 2 or 3 times. I can't say I knew him very well, but I know Councillor David Brown wishes to say a few words in memory of Councillor Woolard.
Thank you, Chairman. I first met Geoffrey Woolard in 1990 when I worked for the National Farmers Union on Broad Street here in Ely. Geoffrey was representing the views of local farmers and seeking help. He was a passionate advocate on behalf of those he represented, and that's something I will always remember about Geoffrey, his passion for what he believed in. Some of us will remember his successful campaign, "Don't Ditch Our Loads," against the Environment Agency plans, and others may remember his campaign to successfully save the little chapel in the Fens. Geoffrey was a prolific letter writer, both to the local and national press, and I suspect all of us will have read a letter from Geoffrey in a newspaper at some point. Whether you agreed with his views or not, he always argued his case clearly. Then, when I was county councillor for Burwell, I had the pleasure of meeting with Geoffrey on numerous occasions in his role as a member of Swaffham Prior Parish Council. He was an active member and always ready with an incisive question or word of advice. I became friends with Geoffrey, and I'm proud to have known him. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Goldsack.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick word on the passing of Geoffrey. I actually known Geoffrey for the best part of a couple of decades. Got to know him through business first and foremost. Words I can use for Geoffrey were bombastic, competitive, forthright, confrontational, and passionate, just as David said. You knew exactly where you stood, whether he liked your idea or whether he didn't like your idea. Geoffrey was not shy in standing forward. And in fact, full credit to Geoffrey, who stood as an independent in the last county council by-election against myself. And he walked every street, knocked on every door, all by himself. At the age, at that point, I think he was then in his late 70s. So he will be missed. And a message to about both of the gentlemen. I'd like to thank them for what they brought to the town of Soham, which is where they finished up living. And they were very generous in their spirit and very generous to what they did locally. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Goldsack. If I can ask council to stand in a minute's silence for both Councillor Morris and Councillor Woolard. Thank you. Thank you, members. So we move on to item 1 on the agenda, which is public question time. And Caroline's just going to check the box. No. That was a no, was it? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So there are no public questions. So moving on to item 2, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman.
Tracy?
We have apologies from councillors Stubbs, Starkey and councillor Alison Whelan.
Okay, thank you. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Declaration of interest for members for any items on the agenda. Do we have any? There is obviously I was just going to mention, there is obviously the standard declaration, which is, I'd already checked with Tracy beforehand, which is in the code of conduct for all members in respect of voting on council tax. That is there within our code of conduct already. Thank you. So item 4 is the minutes of the meetings held on the 20th of October and the 15th of December. Is everybody in agreement with those? Okay, thank you. I'll sign those after the meeting as a true record. Item 5, Chairman's announcements. I've only got one announcement in that, sadly, but I hope she enjoys her retirement, is that Joan Cox is leaving us in March after 41 years service for this council. And I'd like to thank her for her work on behalf of the council and on behalf of all the residents of East Cambridgeshire. And I hope that all members will agree with those comments. Thank you. So item 6 is to receive petitions. None. We move on to item 7, which is the notice of motions under Procedure Rule 10 and headed voter identification So if I can ask councillor Dupre, the proposer of the motion, to propose it. And sorry, and the second, I'm proposing assuming councillor Kane reserves her right to speak. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. The introduction of voter ID requirements is an eye-wateringly expensive solution to a problem that barely exists. The government's own estimate is that it will cost between 65 million and 180 million pounds over 10 years to implement, with a mid-range estimate of 120 million. That could have paid for a lot of nurses. The problem it's claiming to tackle is microscopic. The Independent Electoral Commission reports every year that there is no significant voter fraud. Indeed, the government's decision to pursue this course of action will lead people to assume that fraud is rife and election results cannot be trusted, which is both manifestly untrue and the route to tyranny. Many people who have the right to vote will find themselves prevented from using that vote as a result of this legislation. Estimates indicate that 2 million people in the UK do not have the right form of ID to vote under the government's new rules, and many don't know they need to do something about it. Lack of acceptable ID is not evenly spread. 11% of unemployed people don't have the right form of ID. 8% of disabled people. Just over half of Black people have a driving licence compared to over 3/4 of white people. Many young people don't have a passport or driving licence, nor do some of the very elderly. A senior citizen's bus pass will be accepted as voter ID, but a young person's bus pass won't. If you don't have approved voter ID, you can apply for something called a voter authority certificate. But because the introduction of voter ID has been so rushed, most people still don't know about it. Nationally, only 21,000 of those 2 million without approved ID have applied for a voter authority certificate. In East Cambridgeshire, just 19 applications were received in the first 3 weeks after applications opened in mid-January. To put that into context, if the 2 million people without approved ID were evenly distributed throughout the country, this council could be expecting to process anything up to 2,500 applications. I've been working for some time with officers at Cambridgeshire County Council to ensure, for example, that the County Council offers its facilities such as libraries and family centres as places where District Council election staff can help people with the ID they need to protect their vote. But the message still isn't reaching everyone, and a lot of people are going to lose their legitimate right to vote this May. Turnout at council elections is already just 30% or less. It's not as if the biggest problem with our democracy is that too many people are voting. The government plans will reduce that number still further at huge expense with disproportionate effects. This motion notes the concerns expressed by the Electoral Commission, the Association of Electoral Administrators, and the Local Government Association. It aligns this council with those concerns and resolves to take action to minimise the damage to democracy caused by the new requirements. It calls for a report to the March meeting of this council's Finance and Assets Committee so that progress can be monitored and further action considered as necessary. I encourage all members to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Dupre. Do I have any other speakers? Councillor Bailey.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And I thank councillors Dupre and Kane for putting a spotlight on the subject of voter ID, as it does, of course, give us the opportunity to raise awareness of it here this evening. And I was pleased to talk about it alongside councillor Dupre on Radio Cambridgeshire this morning. I thought it was a good discussion. I do confess to something of a nostalgic affection to our somewhat current quaint system of turning up and telling polling clerks who you are. It is a system that's based on trust, and the fact that it isn't widely abused is an indication of the values that this country holds dear and does uphold. Sadly, though, the system has been abused, and the reality is that most voters actually can't believe they don't have to prove who they are. They often turn up clutching their polling cards, believing that that is the evidence they need to show who they are. Councillor du Preez wants us to write to the government to demand that the legislation requiring voter ID be repealed. I'm sorry, but my take on this is rather more of a pragmatic one. The legislation isn't going to be repealed as a result of a letter from this authority. Voter ID is coming at the May elections, and this council is utterly focusing its efforts on raising awareness of that fact and encouraging those who don't have one of the accepted forms of ID, and there are many forms of ID that are accepted, to get themselves registered with a voter authority certificate, or voter card as people are calling it. It's actually very easy to apply for the voter card. I've done it. It takes less than 5 minutes online, and hard copy paper is also very straightforward, and council officers will support anyone that needs it with this process. The council has an enormous programme of awareness raising activity to augment the national campaign and has received funding from government to support our efforts. I have a list here, which is too long to go into, but rest assured that it includes a huge amount of activity and number and variety of outlets. Obviously, it includes working with parish councils, as well as information being sent to every household that's called for by the motion. And we've got some of the posters and literature on our desks today that the council has already been dealing with. The council has in fact been working since the new year on raising awareness of this change. I'm not actually sure that the same can be said of other Cambridgeshire authorities, who I've personally been somewhat surprised about a distinct lack of activity from. It is incumbent on us all to join in the council's efforts with this and to encourage maximum turnout at the May elections, which for one will please me very much. 100% turnout would be fantastic. I won't be supporting this motion, and instead we will make sure from this side of the chamber that the council remains utterly focused on doing everything it can to raise awareness of this issue, get people registered, support them in that, and make sure people know that they need to turn up with their identification or their voter card.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I've got Councillor Hunt next.
It's all a little bit too late, isn't it? I mean, the time for making these sort of comments was some time ago, so it's just too late. I think we all know that the vote is something that's very, very precious to our democracy. It's something that particularly 100 years ago, people died for. And to get that vote is very important. It's the cornerstone of our democracy. And in my opinion, and it's very simple, it should be cherished, protected and preserved. And all the government's doing at the moment is looking after that very precious thing we have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I've got Councillor Harries next.
First of all, I don't have anything like a religious objection to people needing to prove who they are before casting their vote. There is a serious problem with this legislation and the way that it was brought in. First one is that it is taking a sledgehammer to crack a nut. We are one of those countries that has probably the smallest possible level of voter fraud anywhere among the democratic countries of the world. I'm not saying it never happens. Certainly it does, but it is a vanishingly small problem. There was no need to act on this at this point. In my opinion, this legislation was brought in because it was a good populist move, something to rally the troops. The second point is entirely practical. It came in too fast. We should have staggered this over a period of 1 or 2 more years. It is not something you can do at this speed without having serious problems. It's notorious that the website giving information, the national website giving information about this was not actually up and running until a few weeks ago. That would be enough to make the forthcoming election described by international monitors as not free and fair, which is a pretty disgraceful thing. for a country like this. The third point is that the legislation as framed appears to have been deliberately designed to have an uneven impact. And I don't just mean that the well understood problems here that certain communities within this country are much less likely to have suitable voter ID. I'm thinking of people like my late mother. If she'd been alive when this came in, she wouldn't have a passport. She was confined to a wheelchair. She didn't have a driver's license. She didn't have a bus pass. There was absolutely nothing that she could have done. And there are old people as well as young people who will be disenfranchised. We hear that a major awareness raising effort is taking place. We don't think this is major enough. And one other point that one has to remember is that although the scheme at the top level is free, there are hidden costs. You need a digital photo, that costs. You need to take time, not simply to spend 5 minutes online, assuming you are computer literate and are properly connected. The people who are going to be most impacted by this are the people who do not have spare money, the people who are already struggling during the cost of living crisis. Why exactly do this? My final point is that, of course, this is a country that has repeatedly refused the idea of issuing ID cards to all its citizens. Now, personally, when the last time the Blair government was trying to bring in ID cards, I can remember standing up and championing that great English gentleman, David Davis, and thinking, wow, this is a remarkable moment. Here we are, shoulder to shoulder, libertarians fighting against the machine, trying to stamp us and photograph us and so on. Now, in most other countries in the world, people think this is literally barking mad. Their view is you have an entitlement card, you have a card, proves who you are. That's it, proves who you are. So services you want, here's the card, my age, my citizenship, here it is. And going to vote, you take your card. Everyone's got one, it is not an issue. We don't have them. So for us, it is an issue. And all these questions, why now? Why this cost? Why for this reason? Why design and structure it so that it impacts on certain members of the community more strongly than on others? These are all unanswered questions. Behind this, there is, of course, a conspiracy theory that is voter suppression. And we know that this happens in the United States. People are very, very, very open about it. Make voting difficult, voter suppression. I've wondered if this is the problem with this government. And honestly, I think, yeah, probably not. Probably it's just, here's another thing that we can get people to have a little culture war around. We vote for it, we whip the troops, we move on. Somebody else, I know,
Thank you, Councillor Harris.
picks up the pieces. This will be a car crash. We are heading towards the car crash and we need to stop it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Huffer.
Just very briefly, Councillor Harris, of course, there is always, we have the postal vote system for those that aren't able, sorry, there is always the postal vote system for those that can't get out. People like my 92-year-old mother who hold her vote very dear. I will be making sure that she has the opportunity to register her vote through the postal vote system. I suggest you encourage any residents that you have in your ward who aren't able to get to the polling booth to do exactly the same thing.
Thank you, Councillor Huffer. I've got Councillor Trapp.
Thank you very much. Councillor Huffer just mentioned postal voting, but of course we don't know who's actually voting at the postal vote. We don't. We have no knowledge. In the polling booth, the separation, you're not sure who's going to, there's no indication of how anyone is voting. They could be come in with a family member and they can actually go and vote the way they want to vote. Where we have postal voting, we have no indication of who is actually voting for that. It may be actually votes for sale. We don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Trapp. I'm seeing no more speakers, in which case I'll go to councillor Kane, the seconder of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As we've heard, there's an estimated 2 million people who are at risk of not being able to cast their vote because they don't have the necessary identity and they need to apply for this new ID. We know that a very tiny number, about 19 in this council, have got that ID so far. Councillor Bailey says it's easy to get. It may be easy for those online, for those who have a smartphone and can take a digital photo, for those who can come into Ely and ask our officers for help. But there's a lot of people out there who can't do those things, and it's going to be a challenge. But worse than that, they currently don't know that they have to do it because there hasn't been enough publicity. And that's why this motion asks this council to write to every household so that people are really clear that they're going to have to take identity, what will be acceptable, and how to get the certificate if they haven't got acceptable identity. It's also asking them to make it very easy for them to go and get that certificate at a local library, at a local drop-in, at the library vans, whatever it might be, so that it comes to them rather than them having to go to Ely, because I tell you, for many of my residents, for example, getting to Ely isn't easy. And I think it's unusual for me to agree with Councillor Hunt, but although I disagree with this in principle, at the moment, my deepest concern is, as he said, it's just too late. We kept asking, how is this going to work? What are the rules? What are people going to need for identity? How do they get the certificate? And we were told we're waiting to hear from government. We're waiting for the guidance. We're waiting. While the government went through its however many prime ministers it went through, we had to wait. And so now, very late in the day, we are trying to deal with people who might lose their vote because this government couldn't be bothered to sort out the guidance early enough. Now, it's not just us as a party saying this, it's the Electoral Commission, which is an independent organisation, and they have said the timetable means the local elections coming up this May could not be conducted in a fully secure, accessible and workable manner. All members here have been democratically elected. We should be horrified by that statement, horrified that our government is making us hold elections in May that cannot be fully secure, accessible and workable. So it is perfectly proper that we should write to the government and object. It is also perfectly proper that we should do all the things we set out in this motion to make sure that our residents know that this is coming and make sure they know how to get their voter registration certificate, because the vote absolutely is precious. People fought for it, people died for it. You cannot have a democracy without free and fair and open voting. And it's our job, because we manage the electoral services at this district, it's our job to do our best to make up for the central government's shortcomings and make sure this works. If we've only got 19 applications processed so far, there is no way we're going to get all those people with their certificates in time unless we do something really significant. Posters great, leaflets great, but something has to be sent to every single household. So I hope that everybody, because everybody's talked about the importance of the vote, I hope that everybody will feel able to vote for this motion.
Thank you, excuse me. Thank you, councillor Kane. I now move to councillor Dupre to sum up the motion.
Thank you very much, Chair. Much of what I've heard is what I was expecting. Councillor Bailey told us that she's focused on action. That's all very well. I've been focused on action as well for months, working with the county council to try to make sure that we are in a position at that authority to support districts in offering our premises to be able to do far more face-to-face that is going to be absolutely necessary. Many people have complex and difficult lives and aren't going to pay attention to things that drop through the door. I know that's an unwelcome message for all of us at this time of year, but it is true. Councillor Hunt talks about protecting our vote. It is a strange way of protecting our vote to rip the vote away potentially from 2 million citizens simply because they cannot provide the right bit of paper at the polling station. That's not protecting the vote. This is spreading rumour and suggestion that the vote has been compromised for some time when that's patently not the case. Councillor Harries has referred to the cost of this exercise, the painful cost of this unnecessary exercise, and also to the fact that it has been introduced in such haste that it cannot be relied upon. Councillor Huffer talks about getting a postal vote. It may come as a surprise to her that the government has decided it's going to make postal voting more difficult as well, because we can't have people voting. So now the churn is from having to refresh your postal vote every 5 years, it's going to be to every 3. And there's now also, I believe, powers in the legislation to require provision of identification when applying for a postal vote, rather than simply submitting the very simple form that one can pull off the council website at the moment. I'm not convinced that it's too late, but it's almost too late, I think, to do something about this. There is certainly room for this exercise to be pulled for this election and for people to think again. That's something the government it's entirely within the government's power to do. But it is worrying that many people will not realise until it is too late that their vote has been taken from them. There is no room for complacency here. Many residents without acceptable ID will not realise until too late they need it. For some, the hurdles of cost of photographs, costs of visiting the council, transport to the council, tangling with more bureaucracy, time taken out of busy and complicated lives will prove too much. The Electoral Commission, the Association of Electoral Administrators, the Local Government Association, hardly hotbeds of revolution, have all warned about the dangers of rushing this through. This council needs to stand as the protector of its citizens against this expensive, unnecessary, and democracy damaging legislation. It needs to stretch every sinew and then some to defend its residents and their right to vote.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. We now move to the vote in terms of those who are in favour of the motion, if they can please indicate. You okay, Trace? And those against the motion? Any abstentions?
Thank you, Chairman. So the motion is lost by 9 votes to 14 with 1 abstention.
Thank you. We now move on to item 8, which is to answer questions from members. There are 6 questions, which hopefully everybody's got a copy of those on their table. To help for the stream online, I'm going to ask as normal practice. I'll ask the questioners to read the question out, and then so at least people watching online can get an idea of what's being asked. So the first one is from the leader of the council to the leader of the Liberal Democrat group.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is a question to Councillor Lorna Dupre, leader of the Liberal Democrat group. I note that the Liberal Democrat group began this 4-year administration period with 13 councillors and are now depleted to 9. And I also note that Councillor Matt Downey, who isn't here this evening, has been expelled by his colleagues from the Liberal Democrat group. Can Councillor Dupre please explain to this council and to East Cambs residents why Councillor Matt Downey has been expelled from the Liberal Democrat group? And will Councillor Dupre now condemn the behaviour of Councillor Matt Downey that led to his having been found in breach of the Code of Conduct by an independent external Code of Conduct expert, costing council taxpayers thousands of pounds and leading to the censure of Councillor Downey?
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Dupre.
Chair, Councillor Matt Downey was excluded from the Liberal Democrat group under its standing orders in accordance with the group's procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. I now move to the next question, which is from Councillor Bill Hunt to Councillor Lorna Dupre. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to the leader of the Liberal Democrat group on this council, and also, I believe, the leader of a Liberal Democrat group. No, the second, I believe, on the county council. I can be corrected on that. Doesn't really matter. She is a county councillor. My question is, I note that there have been some 24,000 replies to the recent consultation proposing road charging in Cambridge. I'm aware from conversations with East Cambs residents and from public opinion testing that this proposal is generally opposed and hated. I also note that the final county council decision will not now be made until after the district council elections in May. Please, just to get the record straight, please will Councillor Dupre confirm that if there is a majority of replies to the consultation that oppose the charge, that she will honour democracy and vote against road charging. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. The Making Connections consultation has indeed attracted significant levels of response. Neither Councillor Hunt nor myself knows the contents of those responses, which will take some time to be analysed. Decades of decline have left many of our towns and villages poorly served by public transport. Young people struggle to get to college, work or leisure. Older people and those with disabilities also lose out. Many low-income families can't afford to rent a car. A Liberal Democrat council will work with other councils to get East Cambridgeshire properly connected. We want attractive, reliable, affordable public transport for those who can't drive and those who want a convenient alternative to using a car. Meanwhile, local Conservatives continue to campaign against public transport, calling for the axing of 10 bus routes based on misleading figures, opposing the £1 a month mayoral precept to keep existing rural buses, and trying to sabotage the trial of the experimental Ting demand responsive bus service. I know residents are concerned about proposals for a congestion charge in Cambridge to fund improvements. My group wants major changes to public transport to provide high quality alternatives to driving before charging is considered. And any plan for charging needs to be fair and equitable. The current proposals don't pass that test. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. The next question I've got is from Councillor Christine Whelan to the Chair of the Finance and Assets Committee. Councillor Whelan.
Thank you, Chair. The UK has seen a significant rise in the last few years of hate towards the LGBTQ+ community, especially trans women in local communities. There has also been verbal abuse towards LGBT+ people in our own district. Only this last week, we saw a young trans girl, Brianna Gay, murdered. This is particularly highlighted as this month is LGBT+ History Month. What provisions have the council made regarding protection for the LGBT+ community, and what did the council do this month to recognise LGBT+ History Month this year? Will the council join other councils next year in flying the Progress Pride flag during February next year and fly the Progress Pride flag during Ely Pride? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Christine Whelan. If I can ask Councillor David Brown, the Chairman of the Finance and Assets Committee, to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Christine Whelan, for your question. Any incident or crime that comes to the council's attention is dealt with thoroughly, sensitively, in confidence, and with the victim's full support. Hate crime and incident training took place online in November 2022 for Community Safety Partnership, CSP, partners and parish councils. The training covered what a hate crime is, how to spot it, and what to do about it if you suspect or are told a hate crime against the LGBTQ+ community has occurred. 4 hate crime reporting centres have been established across the district in Fordham, Littleport, Sutton and the Lighthouse Centre in Ely. East Cambs District Council and the CSP are promoting these and encouraging further partners to sign up. Hate crime is also a feature in our Community Eyes and Ears programme. The council has distributed information booklets, provided training to neighbourhood watch groups, members and parish councils, and there's a link to it on the CSP webpage for the public to access. Working with the CSP, we have also created a hate crime toolkit, which has been distributed to all schools in East Cambridgeshire and is available on the CSP webpage for all to access. There is a specific LGBTQ+ section in Council's engagement toolkit. This covers the importance of and methods of engagement, barriers and benefits of engagement for this specific group. With all our communications, we make the content specifically relevant to the people of East Cambridgeshire where possible. For the past 2 years, the comms team has been unable to find specific events being hosted in East Cambridgeshire to support LGBTQ+ History Month. Hence, no posts have been shared to date. If members are aware of any events or activities taking place, then the comms team is very happy to promote them. Comms team is working in partnership with the CSP to produce a proactive comms plan for 2023-24, at which events such as LGBTQ+ history will be showcased. On the 16th of November 2016, under agenda item 10, Council took the decision to fly the Union flag on a permanent basis, unless otherwise instructed by His Majesty's Government. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. The next question is from Councillor Charlotte Kane to the Chair of the Operational Services Committee. Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Chair. As Chair of Operational Services Committee and an observer on the ECSS board, why did Councillor Huffer not bring the financial issues at ECSS to the committee members' attention when they were discussing cancelling January's scheduled meeting of the committee due to lack of business? Why did she consider that an overspend by ECSS of at least £300,000 was not worthy of discussion at an Operational Services Committee meeting in January?
Thank you, Councillor Kane. If I can ask Councillor Julia Huffer, Chair of the Operational Services Committee, to respond.
Thank you, Councillor King, for your question. An email cancelling the Operational Services Committee that was due to be held on the 16th of January 2023 was sent to members of the committee on the 14th of December 2022. The meeting was cancelled due to lack of substantive business. At the time of cancellation, the level of overspend was still being calculated. An indicative overspend figure of £300,000 was reported to the Finance and Assets Committee on the 23rd of January 2023. ECSS held a formal board meeting on the 31st of January 2023 to consider a request to ask the council to increase the 22-23 management fee. Only council can make this decision to agree to this request, as it is outside the budget of the Operational Services Committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Huffer. The next question I've got is from Councillor John Trapp to the Chair of the Operational Services Committee. Councillor Trapp.
Thank you, Chair. As one of the council's observers at the ECSS board meetings, how frequently did Councillor Huffer receive and review management accounts for ECSS?
Councillor Huffer.
Thank you, Councillor Trapp, for your question. The ECSS board last reviewed the management accounts on the 31st of January 2023, Prior to this, as it is essentially on operational budget, the board did not receive management accounts. Instead, it discussed and approved the annual statutory accounts.
Thank you, councillor Huffer. And the final question this evening is from councillor Mark Inskip to the chair of the Operational Services Committee. Councillor Inskip.
Thank you, Chair. This is again in relation to councillor Huffer's being an observer on the board of ECSS. So when did the ECSS board first discuss the forecast overspend for the year to the 31st of March 2023? And when did the board first discuss that the overspend would be at least £300,000?
Thank you, councillor Inskip. Councillor Huffer. Yeah.
Thank you, councillor Inskip, for your question. The ECSS board first discussed the overspend on the 31st of January 2023.
Thank you, councillor Huffer. That ends the questions from members. We now move on to item 9, which is the change to political group proportionality and membership of committees. And then there is, everybody should have 2 sheets of paper. Well, 4, it's actually double-sided, so it's 4 sheets of paper with a revised amendment. And the revised recommendation is that the council notes the proportionality as a result of a change to the membership of the Liberal Democrat group detailed at Appendix 1, and the changes to the allocation of seats on committees arising therefrom detailed at Appendix 2. And these are the revised sheets that everybody has had. As it's a constitutional matter, I'm proposing to propose that from the chair.
Happy to second, Chairman.
Did you want to make any comments on that, Tracy, please, to introduce it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you've had very amply summed everything up for me, which is great. Yes, we had a notification yesterday from the Liberal Democrat group of a compliant proportionality calculation. So that enabled me then to complete the Appendix 2, which we normally have with these proportionality things after we've got agreement from the group leaders. So that meant I could then revise our recommendation to what's on the last page of Appendix 2 now, and which is what you're probably more familiar with seeing when we have these at meetings. So it's just now to note the revised proportionality and the changes in the allocation of seats on Appendix 2. And you'll see that the group leaders can now notify me whenever. There are 2 spaces on Finance and Assets Committee and Planning Committee, which the Conservative group can fill. And there are also a couple of spare substitutes places on Finance and Assets and Planning Committee, which again, the group leader can notify me of those as well.
Thank you, Tracy. Are there any comments? Any member want to comment on that? Okay, in which case, can I go to the vote that members accept the recommendation? Or is anybody against that recommendation? No, I'm taking that as unanimous. Thank you, members. We now move on to item 10, which is the pay policy statement. And thankfully, we've not left Nicole till as late as some meetings when she's had to sit there. I'm sure she enjoys sitting there listening to us, but if I can ask Nicole to introduce the paper. Thank you.
Chairman. Okay, the council's pay policy statement has been updated for the new financial year. As members know, the statement's a requirement of the Localism Act, and 3.2 details the pay for the 6 posts designated as chief officer. As a result of last year's pay award, spinal column point 1 will be deleted from the 1st of April. And the salary of our lowest paid employee will be on point 2, which is currently £10.60 per hour. The ratio between the highest grade and the lowest grade has reduced to 6.4 to 1 at the scale minimum and 6.8 to 1 at the scale maximum. And members are asked to approve and adopt the statement, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nicole. Before I move to the proposition, are there any questions from members of Nicole? No, thank you. In which case, if I can ask for a proposer of the recommendation.
Happy to propose a recommendation, Chairman.
And a seconder.
Happy to second, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any speakers? Unless I see otherwise, I'm taking that as a unanimous approval of the pay policy. I'm seeing nods all round. Okay, thank you. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening, Nicole. Moving on, we now move on to item 11, which is the Community Governance Review, Borough Green, Dullingham Parish Boundary. If I can ask Adrian to introduce it, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report relates to a suggested parish boundary change between the parishes of Borough Green and Dullingham. Members will recall that at the council meeting on the 20th of October last year, they considered a community governance review relating to the boundaries of Borough Green and Wesley Waterless. During the second stage consultation of that review, Borough Green Parish Council suggested a separate boundary change between its parish and Dullingham Parish. Their suggestion is shown in Appendix 1 in the map. Subsequently, a first stage consultation has been carried out, but it's only resulted in one response. This queried the suggestion and objected to it, and those comments are shown in Appendix 3. There's no responses in support of the suggested boundary change were received, and the suggested change had taken no account of the local geography. In fact, it suggested going through the middle of a resident's property, and if it proceeded, it would result in a boundary anomaly. Therefore, it had recommended that no further action be taken on this, meaning that the second stage consultation should not go ahead and the current boundary remains unchanged. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Adrian. Are there any questions of Adrian on that matter? No, I'm going to propose this from the chair because this is actually Borough Green and Dullingham are both parts of my ward. There is I will speak to the parish council, but there is the opportunity with the mandatory polling districts and polling places view for them to bring that forward again if they want to with more substance. But I'm happy to propose it from the chair.
Happy to second again, Chairman.
Okay, and can I take that as unanimously supported, members? Okay, thank you, Adrian. Thank you very much. Now move on to item 12, which is the schedule of items recommended from committees and other member bodies. And item 12A is the Treasury Operations Mid-Year Review. Is there a proposer for that?
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to propose the Treasury Operations Mid-Year Review, and if I could just draw members' attention to the extract from the minutes that's in the paperwork, where somebody commented about the figures relating to the UK economy. That was correct at the end of September 2022, and the next report will undoubtedly update that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown. Do I have a seconder for?
Up to second, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any speakers on this? So I'm seeing that as, again, passed unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 12B, the annual Treasury Management Strategy minimum review provision. Do I have a proposer for that, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Happy to propose.
And Councillor Bovingdon.
Happy to second, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any speakers on that? Councillor Bailey.
Just very happy to note, Chairman, that this council continues to plan for no external borrowing in 2023-24. It's a policy that stood us in good stead. It means we don't have high interest debt charges to have to pay like many authorities do. And I think it's served this council very well. And I thank Ian for his management of that.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Then item 12C is the is to adopt the updated, sorry. Yes, I'm taking that as unanimous from with the nods on. Okay, thank you. Then 12C, which is the anti-fraud and corruption policy, to resolve to adopt the anti-fraud and corruption strategy as at Appendix 1. Do I have a proposer for that?
Yes, happy to propose, Chairman.
And I will second that as a member of the audit committee. Thank you. Do I have any speakers on this item? No, in which case, is everybody to, am I reading that everybody accepts that unanimously? Okay, great, thank you. Sorry, moving on to item 13, which is the revenue budget, capital strategy and council tax for 2023-2024. Sorry, I've lost my notes. Ian, did you want to introduce that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Council is asked to approve the 8 recommendations as detailed in paragraph 2.1 of the report, including the council tax resolution as detailed in appendix 1, and the council's budget as in appendices 2 and 5 of the report. The council tax resolution was circulated to members after the original dispatch of the agenda, as we did not have the information from all the preceptors at the time of the agenda dispatch. When the draft budget report was presented to Finance and Assets Committee on the 23rd of January, we were still awaiting for the final local government finance settlement from government and the business rates information from the NNDR1 return. All this information has now been published and is included in the papers now in front of you. I've also made a few other minor changes as additional information has come to light between the two meetings. This updated information, especially that in relation to business rates, in net terms has made a positive difference from the position reported to Finance and Assets Committee. The surplus saving reserve requirement to balance the 23-24 budget, reducing from 2.521 million to 1.976 million. The council, via its use of the surplus savings reserve, has a balanced budget for 23-24 and 24-25, and thus does not need to make any immediate changes to service delivery. This without the need to increase the council's element of council tax in 23-24, this for a 10th consecutive year. However, the council does continue to have a significant savings requirement in years 3 and 4 of the MTPS, so it does need to be considering how this gap is to be bridged in order to achieve a balanced budget in those years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. I now move to the proposer of the motion, Councillor Bailey.
Happy to move the motion. Do you want me to speak now or?
Chair, happy to second and hand back.
Yeah, I'm aware we've got an amendment. If you speak now, then I will bring the amendment in after you've spoken. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Conservatives have held a long-held belief in these CAMs that taxation should be a matter of last port of call, not first. It's important to say that this cannot and isn't be at the expense of running high-quality services. This evening, we're proposing to freeze this council's share of council tax bills for the 10th year. Whilst other Lib Dem and Labour-run authorities in Cambridgeshire rush to increase council tax and impose other brand new forms of taxation on hard-pressed residents, East Cambs District Council will be the only district or upper-tier authority in the country to have frozen council tax for 10 years. The council has a balanced budget for the next 2 years. We're not hemorrhaging money, placing vulnerable families into bed and breakfast. We don't have to spend money servicing debt as we have no external borrowing, and we have a healthy 10% of our operating budget in general reserves. Contrary to hysterical online accusations, this council is not raiding its reserves to balance the books. Ours is a very small district council. Nevertheless, we've recently committed 2.3 million to 9 fantastic community projects across the district. On top of over 10 million, we've already invested in other community infrastructure and 3.8 million we've given to parish councils. I'm disappointed that the Lib Dems voted against funding for the 9 community projects like the Soham to Wicken Cycleway, improving accessibility over Burwell Road, an apprenticeship hub at Viva's Spencer Mill, a new cemetery and biodiversity project in Bottisham, a new hub and GP consulting rooms in Streatham. The Liberal Democrats voted against every single one of these projects and others. Conservatives will continue with our significant community investment programme. We also continue with our promise of free parking in the council-owned town and city centre car parks, a policy that is under serious threat from Liberal Democrats, and we've once again frozen the charges in our commuter car parks. And we're making investment into our waste service, both this year and in future years, including putting money aside for black wheelie bins and 2.8 million for new fleet vehicles, which will run on hydro-treated vegetable oil, helping the council to significantly cut its emissions. Back in 2016, Conservatives took a very deliberate decision to set up East Cambs Trading Company. The company is 100% owned by the council and is focused on ways to support the council's running costs to help keep council tax low. ECTC runs the much loved and award-winning Ely Markets, the Parks and Open Spaces team, and Palace Green Homes. Ely Markets makes a modest surplus, thereby no longer costing the council anything to run. Parks and Open Spaces are now able to provide services for other organisations like schools and parish councils, providing a great service whilst reducing the council's own costs. Palace Green Homes builds new homes, which is often done in cooperation with community land trusts, which own and provide genuinely affordable housing reserved for local people with the strongest ties to their community, and which bring in funds to the council via sales, new council tax receipts, and community infrastructure levy payments. Part of our budget today increases the loan facility to East Cambs Trading Company by 1.7 million, so it can continue to deliver its activities and new homes for local people, which will return significant levels of income from interest payments to the council. The trading company has benefited the council by over 3.6 million to date, which is expected to rise to around 4.6 million by the end of this financial year. It's disappointing that the Lib Dems regularly seek to portray this as some sort of failure. It isn't. It's a huge success story. It's exactly what we set out to do. And to put it into context, raising the East Cambs element of council tax by 1% brings in just £45,000 to this council. You cannot trust the Liberal Democrats. Last time they were in charge here at East Cambs, they put up council tax by 60%. At the Lib Dem County Council and South Cambs District Councils, they've once again put up council tax by the maximum allowed. The Cambridgeshire Lib Dems with Labour are the architects of the hated Cambridge congestion charge, yet another tax. And the Lib Dems voted through a brand new form of local taxation, the mayoral precept. Lib Dems only know how to tax. They might be saying now that they want a council tax freeze, but their record here and elsewhere shows they absolutely don't mean it. I'm proud of the record of delivery of our officers of this council. I'm proud to propose this responsible and well-managed Conservative budget, and I'm proud to propose a 10th year of council tax freezes at this council.
Okay, thank you,
Chairman,
Councillor Bailey.
A point of order, please, Chair. Under the council's constitution and the code of conduct, I'd just like to point out, Chair, that Councillor Harries might want to apologise to council and yourself and anyone viewing the YouTube video for his foul and abusive language, which I overheard and saw, not contrary to our code of conduct and the behaviour of members, swearing and using that foul and abusive language. I just hope there's no young residents watching this feed who could lip read and hear what he said. Thank you, Chairman.
I certainly didn't hear anything from the chair.
Sorry, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, you troublemaker? Calm down.
Let's calm it.
you
Okay. Okay.
complete fool.
Councillor
How
Harries,
dare
please.
you.
Councillor Harries, please. I didn't hear anything from the chair. If I can move now to the amendment, if I can ask Councillor Dupre to introduce to speak on the amendment.
Chairman, I'm sorry, but if Councillor Harries is then going to make rude and crude gestures to me across the floor, I think he ought to apologise. It's disgusting behaviour. He needs to grow up.
Can I just point out, I have a precancerous growth on my nose caused by exposure to sun. And unfortunately, I occasionally have to scratch it. I don't make stupid schoolboy gestures. I didn't even do it when I was a schoolboy. As for now, I am, as somebody who has had ADHD, lifelong, OCD, and also
Councillor Harries,
Tourette's.
please, come on, let's move on.
I
I'm trying to move
twitch.
on.
You
I'm
get
trying
it?
to move-
I twitch.
I'm trying to move on now. Thank you. Thank you. Calm down. Can I ask Councillor Dupre to introduce the motion? I'm sorry, the amendment, and I'm presuming Councillor Kane reserves her right to speak on it. So, Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair, for your attempt to restore some order to this chamber. I wasn't at all impressed with that intervention. The alternative budget from this group introduces a new local plan for the district, a move to civil parking enforcement like the rest of England and Wales, a doubling of the Fund for Environmental and Climate Change schemes, and a grant pot for support for local coronation events. It retains a council freeze for 2023-24. It is a responsible alternative budget that, unlike the Conservative proposals, doesn't duck the need to start work on a new local plan. Our existing local plan is now 8 years old and will struggle to defend the council and its residents against planning appeals and inappropriate development. Our budget proposes to build in a turnover allowance of £200,000 each year to reflect that not all council job posts are filled all year round. This saving will be put into a reserve fund to pay for the cost of a new local plan. And I would say in passing that one of the most shocking things that I have heard recently about this council's running under the present administration is that there is no reserve fund for the construction of a new local plan. I find that truly shocking. Our alternative budget proposes to take on responsibility for managing unlawful on-street parking. The police have other things to do. The county council and partners are even willing to stump up £150,000 towards the setup costs to enable us to join the rest of the country, and we would use SIL money for the rest. Otherwise, under this administration, East Cambridgeshire will shortly be the only district in the country apart from Wealden and the Isles of Scilly, which leaves this job to the police. It's an extraordinary hill for this administration to choose to die on. Our alternative budget puts an additional £100,000 into the District Council's Environment Fund for each of the next 4 years. The climate crisis won't wait, and there are discussions to be had with communities and businesses about how this money can be best used. For many of us, this year will see the first coronation of a British monarch in our lifetime, certainly the case for me. Many local communities will be marking this event, but have found the 12-week deadline for lottery funding challenging. A one-off grant pot of £20,000 will provide support for some local groups to celebrate the coronation in a memorable way. This and all the other proposals in our alternative budget are achieved within a council tax freeze for the coming year. This amendment is fully costed, fully funded and fully balanced. It addresses the urgent need for a replacement local plan and, unlike the ruling group, sets funding aside to pay for its development. It deals responsibly with the menace of unlawful on-street parking in a way that not only leaves the police to pursue their core purpose, but also through civil parking enforcement, opens up opportunities to this council to tackle not only parking, but also offences such as breaches of weight limits by lorry drivers, something the county council is now opening up to more communities through its pot of funding for weight limits through the local highways improvement process. It puts more resource into addressing the climate emergency. A Liberal Democrat council will be going back out to communities to engage with them about projects and opportunities for match funding, not carrying money over from year to year unspent. And finally, I'm looking forward to the coronation, even though the last street party I went to in my village was the day I ended up overturning my first car in a ditch at Coldham. I remember it well. A small pot for grants to communities to help mark the occasion, but not in that way, will, I think, be welcomed. I move this amendment and commend it to all members.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. Do I have any speakers on the amendment? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the amendment here, and I can't see that anybody really who has been involved in local politics for a long time would want to bring in a ring fence money and create a reserve for something that's going to change. And just before it's going to change and a new system is going to come in, you'd put a reserve down. I can't understand that. That's the first point. And the second point that concerns me greatly is that for many years, we've thought the Liberal Democrats were trying to charge people to park in our city centre and in our town centres, which the public don't want. But nevertheless, the introduction of CPE is clearly the first step that the Liberal Democrats would want to take to charge people who come in from the villages to do their shopping. And I represent Will Burton, and it hasn't got a shop, it hasn't got a post office, it's only got one garage. And if those people want to come into Ely, by the time this CPE is the first step towards charging in the car parks, and I oppose it totally. And I think this idea of building up a £200,000 fund because of the gap in employment, I think clearly it will slow down recruitment, or if people get employed, it'll lead to an overspend. So I really just don't think this alternative budget is really worth the paper it's printed on. And I certainly won't be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, councillor Hunt. I've got councillor Inskip next.
Thank you, Chair. So this amendment, as has already been said, seeks to address some important measures that are urgently needed in East Cambridgeshire. Measures which have been ignored, sidelined, or even opposed over the last 4 years by the current administration, and none more so than civil parking enforcement. We hear the lie time after time that civil parking enforcement must be charging, but there's plenty of places across the country where you can park for free in a car park, but if you park illegally on the street, you get a parking fine. If you park dangerously on the street, you get a parking fine. Now, I think that is really important. Councillor Hunt, he may be happy with people parking with immediate and not worrying about parking on WL lines, creating hazards. Does he not listen to those residents who raise time after time the problems that unlawful parking creates in our district, not just in Ely, but across the district? And instead of distracting this amendment gives a grown-up response to that unlawful parking. It doesn't create those stupid smoke screens. Instead, it's looking to fight against it's allowing the police to fight against crime whilst they not distracting them with the need to issue parking tickets, which they simply don't have time for. It takes on the responsibility of civil parking enforcement using funding from developers and a time-limited grant from the county council for the setup costs. And if we don't do that, we'll shortly be the only district, apart from Wealdon and the Isles of Scilly, not somewhere that has a huge traffic problem, where it's left for the police to enforce on-street parking. And worse than that is that if we don't adopt civil parking enforcement, we can't take on powers to enforce weight limits. Now, my village, and I know our neighbouring village, both Sutton and Haddenham, are looking to take advantage of the change in policy at the county council to introduce to apply for HGV weight limits to stop HGVs rat running through our villages. But if it's left to the police, those weight limits are going to be very difficult to enforce. Again, we can take on those powers as a council, and we can really do something about HGVs, not voluntary agreements, which always seem to be Councillor Hunt's way, but proper enforcement. On the local plan, we have a local plan that isn't fit for purpose, adopted 8 years ago, but much of the content is older. It's a decade ago that myself as a parish councillor was involved in the village vision discussions that got into the 2015 local plan. That's a decade out of date. You know, since then in my own village, we created a neighbourhood plan where we're shortly due to complete an update of that. Our local plan is not fit for purpose. It's not able to provide and won't be able to provide in the years going forward the protection of local communities from speculative development. It doesn't mention at all the climate emergency or climate change. We're in desperate need of a local plan, and that's what this budget from the Liberal Democrat group will deliver. And next, the climate emergency. It's 3.5 years since we declared a climate emergency, but very little that we've done. We actually underspend on the existing budget rather than being ambitious and pushing forward. Just as an example, we're in the bottom 20% of councils for public electric vehicle charging infrastructure in a rural district where all too often public transport isn't a viable alternative. And it's just 7 years to the deadline where the government has set that all new cars will be electric. We've talked for a couple of years about having a few EV charging points in at least one car park. We're still talking, they're still not there. We need to do much, much more. There's there's matched funding available. We need to make use of that. We need to provide options for those town and village residents in particular who don't have off-street parking. We need a step change in our plans for the environment. And finally, we have this year, the Queen's coronation, the first coronation in a lifetime of many East Cambridgeshire residents. Across the district, communities want to come together, but they're struggling to find funding. What better way we can do to help by making a small fund available for community groups? All of those come together to make a much better proposal than we've heard from the other side this evening. And I commend the Liberal Democrat budget to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Inskip. I've got Councillor Christine Whelan.
So here we go again with the Tory budget that hides behind realism. A budget that ignores what has actually happened. A Tory budget that will be wildly different from the outcome. But these are not accusations about 1 year, but every year. Of course, they will claim good management, but it isn't. It's financial incompetence, Tory financial incompetence. Even the leader of the council claimed that the outturn for the current year is an irrelevant comparison when dealing and setting the budget for the following year. This kind of financial mismanagement is what we have come to expect from the Conservatives. Our amendment acknowledges one of those misbudgeted items, an item that in some years is out by nearly £500,000, but has been out every year that we could find comparisons. I will give those opposite credit for one action, and that is to take the first small and easy steps to help the climate, but much more is needed, and there they have failed. We need to step up the environmental agenda and make so that it starts to tackle the harder parts, decarbonising, depolluting the rivers, helping residents live in healthier and greener homes, free of mould that many landlords and more are happy to risk the lives of our children with. We will invest in the community, we will empower the people, we will provide additional funding to help eliminate these failings. The biggest complaint heard on the doorstep and in emails is about traffic and parking. It is never ending, yet a simple solution has been offered and supported by the Combined Authority and the County Council: civil parking enforcement. I know those opposite claim that this means the ending free parking, but that has been proved wrong on so many levels and so many occasions. The money is set up already and exists and could easily have been accessed, but those opposite have refused. There will be a cost, but residents have asked for it. Yet they have been told again and again, it is a police issue and the council will never allow civil parking enforcement, preferring it to be the only area not to have CPE and to put additional pressure on our overstretched police. This is for the residents of East Cambridgeshire, representing their needs. Our amendment demonstrates funding is available to do these things. This is an amendment to try and deal with just a small part of the financial incompetence that we see from the Conservative across the whole of local and national government. The amendment is for the residents of East Cambridgeshire, steps for the future. It seeks to provide what residents have asked for, and it seeks to take a bigger step on the Environment Improvement Plan.
Thank you, Councillor Whelan. I'm seeing no more speakers on the, Councillor David Ambrose-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It's just an observation regarding the grant, shall we say, to the parish councils. That is £20,000 there, which is a nice figure. There's 35 parishes in the district or thereabouts. That's £571 per parish council. That's 11 cans of paint. It really is painting the town, isn't it? 11 cans of paint. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David Ambrose-Smith. I'm seeing no more speakers on the amendment, so I move to Councillor Kane as the seconder of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There are several things, well, obviously there are several things in this amendment that I really like, but the local plan is possibly the most important, because the old local plan that we have, as we've heard several times this evening, really isn't fit for purpose. We tried to put some supplementary planning guidance in to improve the requirements for house builders to build houses that are actually going to be energy efficient and sustainable into the future. And the developers came back to the consultation pretty much saying, if you do this, we'll see you in court. And the officer advised that actually they were quite correct. The local plan didn't provide enough hooks within it for us to introduce the supplementary planning that we wanted. We had lots of consultation responses to that from local residents asking for improvements that would make environmental improvements, active travel improvements. And the advice was, unfortunately, the local plan doesn't allow sufficient hooks to hang those improvements on. So we need a new local plan. More recently, at the recent planning committee, we were looking at a plan for a so-called green village, and yet it didn't have proper provision for active transport. And we asked about this, and the officer said, quite frankly, you haven't got the policies that allow us to require this. So we're allowing developers to build places that are not fit for the 21st century, let alone the 22nd. So we need a good, up-to-date local plan, and we need it as soon as possible. On parking, the parking has become such an issue. Not only do we get lots of complaints from residents, but I have to frequently bring my disabled mother into Ely to try and access shops, medical facilities and so forth. And the parking is chock-a-block. And there's people parked for hours. There's people parked in loading bays. There's people parked in disabled bays without the blue badges. It is creating a huge problem for all of us. And it, at times, Ely is becoming really quite unpleasant. And some of our villages are really unsafe at certain times because of the inconsiderate, unsafe and illegal parking. And yet we refuse to do anything about it. So having in our budget the opportunity to introduce civil parking enforcement is really important, and it's a complete red herring to say that that's a first step towards charging for car parks. It's nothing to do with charging for car parks. It's to do with charging people who are parking illegally on the streets, and it is the police don't have time to do it, and it's becoming a complete free-for-all, and it's really dangerous. Young people can't see to cross the road properly. People can't get their pushchairs past. It's wrong. And this budget amendment seeks to address that. The other area that I'm concerned about, and we've heard about tonight, is the environment. This council is too complacent about it. I've already talked about it in line of the local plan, but also in line of what we're doing, what we're paying to do. And that's why we're doubling the budget, so that we can talk with people and we can have some real ambition about what we're going to do to get this council, this area, down to net zero, and in a way that enables people to enjoy life and get full opportunities, not restricting people, but opening opportunities to people. So a decent budget for that is very important. You talk about the 20,000 not being a lot. It isn't a lot. It's a shame it wasn't introduced earlier, because of course we're looking at May for these parties. So it's an amount we felt was realistic in terms of how many councils would need to bid into the budget, and to give people, let's face it, we've had a pretty rotten few years with COVID and war in Ukraine and the cost of living crisis. So the idea that all our villages can get together and have a bit of a celebration, and if they need some money to help them with it, there's a pot there to do it. So I recommend this Lib Dem budget, the budget amendment. I think it allows this council to deliver many of the things that our residents have been asking us for, and I hope that everyone will support it.
Thank you, councillor Kane. I now move to councillor Bailey to sum up on this amendment. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm pleased, in fact, to see that the Lib Dems agree with the vast majority of our budget proposal. But what's disappointing, however, is that the Lib Dems, who've been screaming hysterically about future years' budget gaps for many years, are now unbelievably seeking to increase those budget gaps. They want to raid money that doesn't exist from future years of our budget in order to fund election headlines. The Lib Dem proposals are not fully funded. There's a clear increase in the budget gap in future years. On the local plan, I note that whilst the Lib Dems want to put aside funding for a new local plan in 2023-24, they're not actually proposing to take any actual action whatsoever. Perhaps that's because they know that work on the local plan is already underway. They want to raid the council staffing budget in order to do this. No, I will not have the Lib Dems effectively deleting staff posts while putting money into a reserve for doing no work on the local plan. This council has a 7+ year housing land supply. Just today, we've had an appeal dismissed upholding our land supply calculations. We've already embarked on a single issue review of our growth policy. The national planning system is undergoing huge reform. The new style local plan making process will not commence until the end of 2024. We cannot embark on a new local plan under the old system. It would be absolutely madness. It would be an open invitation to accusations of our plan being out of date and appeals being submitted. As we've always done in the past, we'll be ready to fund the development of a new local plan when the timing's right to do so. That's something that's under constant review and will be kept under review. This budget amendment does nothing for the local plan in 23-24 and it's totally unnecessary. Lib Dems want the council to issue parking tickets on the streets of our district, but mark my words, this will mean bringing in car parking charges in the council-owned town and city centre car parks. Even the Lib Dem-led county council knows that this is the case. Their own report states that South Cambs District Council will have to bring in car parking charges in the villages of South Cambridgeshire. East Cambs Conservatives promised to keep car parking free. We've worked with the police on a new enforcement role that's akin to special constables to tackle illegal parking, but also importantly, road safety and speeding as well. Members will be aware from the update provided by the police to this council in October that recruitment and rollout of the scheme is planned to begin this spring. The Lib Dems don't want this proportionate way of dealing with the issue. Free to this council. They want to start using taxpayers' money, 500,000 in capital outlay, money that could go towards community buildings and projects. They say they want to spend 40,000 per year paying for the cost to run CPE. This council looked at this in minute detail before Councillor Dupre was a councillor here, and the costs were in the hundreds of thousands to run an effective system. And that's why those councils that have CPE also largely charge for car parking in their car parks. Free parking is totally incompatible with civil parking enforcement, and free parking will end under this Liberal Democrat proposal. We haven't heard from the Lib Dems what they propose to do with their increased environment fund, but the fact is that their proposal is not fully funded in future years of the budget. We'd be really happy to work with the Lib Dems on their additional proposals. We haven't had any from them in the Operational Services Committee, and to build them into our successful environment plan, which is updated every year. Conservatives and this council are committed to getting to net zero by 2040. We're going great guns with our environment plan. We're changing our waste fleet. We're adopting more environmentally friendly ways of working. We're doubling land for nature. We've outlined 9 areas across the district for biodiversity boost, places like Wickham Fen, the East Washes, Soane Commons. And we've worked with communities to plant community orchards all over the district, planted thousands of trees, supported retrofitting of homes with energy improvements, and we're the first council to help schools achieve Ofsted's sustainable development goals. And we've built in funding to bring in black wheelie bins to improve our recycling rates. East Cambs is already the best in the county and one of the best in the country on recycling. I cannot support the effective loss of staff posts. By deleting 200,000 from the staffing budget, by spending it elsewhere will simply mean an overspend when we do recruit. I can't support this amendment. Raiding staff posts to fund these items is totally wrong. The local plan will be funded at the time it's right to do so. Spending hundreds of thousands of taxpayers' money to bring in a bureaucratic, expensive, inefficient and ever increasingly costly system to issue parking tickets is absolutely not necessary. The police are bringing in a new system and a specific role to issue fines for illegal parking and to deal with speeding. We'd love to work with the Lib Dems to work any proposals they have into our environment plan, but I simply cannot support this amendment.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Councillor Bailey. We now move to the vote, and as it's a vote on the council tax, even amendment or the main substantive item, it is a recorded vote under the Constitution. So if you cannot for, against or abstain, we're voting on the amendment here. So Tracy.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, we are voting on the budget amendment. Please can you indicate whether you're voting for, against or abstaining? Councillor Christine Ambrose Smith,
Against.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith,
Against.
Councillor Sue Austin, Councillor Anna Bailey,
Against.
Councillor Ian Bovingdon,
Against.
Councillor David Brown,
Against.
Councillor Charlotte Kane,
For.
Councillor Lorna Dupre, 4, Councillor Lavinia Edwards, Councillor Liz Every, Councillor Mark Goldsack,
Against.
Councillor Simon Harries, Councillor Julia Huffer,
Against.
Councillor Bill Hunt,
Against.
Councillor Mark Inskip,
For.
Councillor Alec Jones,
4.
Councillor Daniel Schumann,
Against.
Councillor Joshua Schumann, Councillor Alan Sharp,
Against.
Councillor John Trapp, Councillor Paola Tramarco, Councillor Joe Webber,
Against.
Councillor Christine Whelan,
For.
Councillor Gareth Wilson.
For.
Can't count. Sorry. So the budget amendment is lost by 8 votes in favour to 16 votes against. With no abstention.
Thank you, Tracy. We now move to the main substantive motion. Can I ask for any speakers on the motion? Councillor Goldsack.
I'd like to be a little bit parochial about it, if I can. As the wearer of many hats, as I know that many people in this room do, I also am the chairman of Salmtown Rangers Football Club. Salmtown Rangers Football Club has been at the heart of the community for the best part of a century. But we've got a building that's tired and old. We've got a community that we're not really using and doing it. But through the community support scheme, we managed to get a grant. And this May, we should be starting a refurb. What that's going to do is not necessarily put more people through our gates to watch our football. We hope it does, but that's not really the aim. The aim here is to turn it into North Soham's community hub. So what we're doing is we're going to be running pensioner lunches. We're going to be running, we've got a knit and natter group already in there, the WI meet in there. We've got a youth club that's already started with support from the local youth organisations. It's just a huge step, not just for Salmtown Rangers, but for the community, particularly of North Soham. And it's a great thing that we were able to apply and do this. And we did this under this budget, under what's been delivered this year. I'd just like to say thank you for it. And for that reason, I very much support the budget that we're moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsack. I've got Councillor Hunt.
I'm very proud to be a part of East Cambs District Council. And when I talk to people who I meet in the street or on the doorstep, I'm still proud and totally proud. And one of the things, of course, is 0% council tax increase for 10 years. I see that the opposition party are trying to jump on our bandwagon, but of course they're 10 years behind. And also, the last time they did it, I think the figure was actually 62% they put the council tax up. Some people say 60 just to be safe. But you know what's in their blood? Their blood is tax, tax, tax. And the true colours are coming out now. I believe South Cambs have just passed their budget and they have gone in for the maximum the law allows. We know that the county council is led by a Liberal Democrat coalition and they put the council tax up by the maximum the law allows. It's in their DNA. They can't help it. They might cover up just for something like tonight and say, oh, we'll have no council tax for a year, but my God, we'll have to pay for it later. I'm also very proud when I go round, I only represent in my ward 4 villages, and I go there and I know that there's a new hub being financed in Streatham, which includes a doctor's surgery. I think good on you. It even includes an extension to the cemetery. And that's what's going to be needed and appreciated there. Unfortunately, I'll be sooner than most of you. But I love it when I go to Witchford and I see their village hall being improved and extended and modernised and brought up to date and allowing the youngsters of Witchford to enjoy their games of football or whatever. And I also think it's great to go to Little Thetford and see solar panels being ordered to go on the roof so they could be very much more going towards zero and not polluting. So there's Witchford and there's Streatham and there's Little Thetford, and they're all benefiting from sound housekeeping. Sound housekeeping. We have to think about council tax, you know. It's one of the few things you can go to prison if you don't pay it. And it is a huge amount for almost everybody. Even a band A is 1,400 odd pounds a year. And for many people who are living, for example, just on a state pension, that's a significant chunk of their money. But it's also a significant chunk at the top end. Did you realise that if you have a band H property, and not many do, but it's the top end, it's £4,400 a year. And if that person is a high rate taxpayer, as they probably would be, they've got to earn £7,000 to pay their council tax, £7,000 in a year. So I say we look after the public's money. We don't spend it with gay abandon. It's not ours. We have it in trust. We should use it properly. And as a result of those thoughts, I totally support this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I've got Councillor Harries next.
So just one word about tax. In the end, tax can be used for purely ideological purposes. Ever since Benjamin Franklin said that there are only two certain things in life, death and taxes, everybody has wanted to avoid raising taxes if they possibly can. Despite the fact that you try to tar us as people who just adore the idea of taking money from people, we really, really don't. What we don't buy is this idea that there is an automatic correlation between low tax and economic growth and prosperity. Now, we've had an experiment in applying exactly this policy earlier last year when Elizabeth Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng tried this. The markets went into meltdown. Many of them still feel that it was the market's fault. The markets were dangerously socialist and nothing to do with them. But the problem is that there are people now whose expenditure has actually gone up as a direct result. In the end, what matters is the net benefit to the people. The ideology is not important. There are certain circumstances in which being more responsible about the rate of tax will end up reducing the economic burden on people by giving them better services, by, on the macro scale, on a national government level, by making sure that their mortgage interest rates don't go up to the point where they are suffering true hardship. It's too easy. It's a dog whistle. You blow this dog whistle at every meeting. The Libs want to put up tax. We'll keep your tax down. Over and over and over again, right across the country, councils are struggling with their budgets and are putting up their council taxes. Some of them, including the Conservative-controlled borough of Thurrock, I believe has been given special dispensation to raise its council tax by, was it 25%? Somebody will certainly know, because of the problems that they are facing. It's not a Lib Dem, it's not a Labour, it's not a hung council issue. It is a general problem that's affecting the entire country. We did not cause the cost of living crisis. We're not in power, if you'd noticed. You claim the benefits of your own policies. You must also own the defects. This obsession with council tax as the only measure of virility for a council is foolish, narrow, and it will come back to bite you in the end. It's inevitable that this is going to have to change in the next few years. And you are so much painted in a corner that you can no longer carry out proper, rational discussions and decision-making. You're not capable of it anymore, just like many of the people on the right of your party nationally. And we are suffering. We're becoming a poor country. Our incomes are now lower than that of Slovenia, and in 2 years' time will be lower. The average income of a family in this country will be lower than families in Poland. This is an inevitable consequence of the policies that Conservative governments have followed for 13 years. You do not have the right to talk to us about economic competence. You simply don't. I'm tired of it, and I think the electors are tired of it as well, as you will shortly find out.
Thank you, Councillor Harries. I've got Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. We set out our alternative proposals and a direction for this council very different from the one pursued by this administration. The response from the administration has been the usual cynical distortion of fact and series of baseless claims. There's a need for change at East Cambridgeshire District Council. The lack of an independent advice service for most people in the district, other than those in the area around Newmarket who can still use the citizens' advice services there. The unfolding of the financial issues behind the troubled East Cam street scene, set up in a panic, as we remember, when this administration failed to understand the legal status of its original trading company, had given notice to Veolia and was on the point of having nobody to deliver its waste collection services. The tangled skein of relationships between the council, its trading company, and some community land trusts, and the acute shortage of genuinely affordable housing for rent, which the administration's policies do nothing to address. The diversion of SIL money meant for local communities to fund an unnecessary and unwanted crematorium at Neaple. Councillor Hunt referred to the Streatham Community Hub. Would that by any chance be the community hub that 2/3 of residents of Streatham said in a parish poll that they wanted paused until May so that a new parish council could reconsider? As for his diatribe on council taxes, he didn't mention the 3/4 of upper tier authorities, many of them Conservative, increasing council tax by the maximum amount permitted, nor did he mention Conservative Croydon with special dispensation to raise its council tax by 15%, or the wildly overspending, bizarrely managed district of Thurrock, where my daughter lives, which is facing horrendous financial issues as a result of ongoing Conservative mismanagement. Councillor Harries was very eloquent and absolutely right about the dire state of this country and its economy as a result, a direct result of decisions by the Conservative government, not only government of Truss and Kwarteng, that short-lived implosion of the national economy and national self-respect, I think, certainly implosion of respect for this country around the world, who are in utter disbelief at the state in which we have allowed ourselves to be misgoverned, but also the ongoing policies before and since, which have led to such a fall from grace that this country has experienced, this great country has experienced. So nationally and locally, there are so many ways in which the Conservatives are letting East Cambridgeshire down. This budget from this administration is just one of those ways, and a change in May cannot come fast enough.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. Are there any other speakers on the budget? In which case I now go to Councillor Josh Schumann as the seconder of the recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. as a budget at the end of the term, it means you often find yourself reflecting. And we reflect even back further than the 4-year term that we've just been through, in that when we look back at 10 years of frozen council tax at East Cambs, is something which absolutely should be celebrated, and we should congratulate both the Conservative administrations and the officers for all the hard work that has been put in to achieve that unrivaled 10-year council tax freeze. But behind that is a plethora of other things to celebrate, including, and we've heard tonight, about bringing the waste service back in-house, offering a better service at better value, for a cheaper value for money, but also maintaining often the Cinderellas of local government, the departments which don't always get a mention this time of year, including planning, licensing, environmental health, housing now providing support, in-house support, better support for our residents, making sure they're supported through the most difficult times of their lives. This is all done in the context of council tax freezes. So it's easy to see a council tax freeze and hear the mantra from some members suggesting that this has been at the detriment of services. But we've seen the absolute opposite here at East Cambs. We've continued to maintain and better services at the same time as freezing council tax. In that same 10-year period, we've delivered the Hive, the wonderful leisure facility. When other councils across the country were closing theirs, we were opening new facilities, better facilities for our residents and their health. We've also made available grants for sports and leisure activities throughout the district, as we've seen this evening. And also, and to end on, the brilliant work we've seen at trying to provide affordable housing, genuinely affordable housing for our residents, including supporting CLTs and particularly the 100K homes. I had the pleasure of knocking on the doors of some of the residents of those 100K homes and hearing how pleased they were to be able to stay in the areas which they've grown up or lived in for many years because of this council's policies. This budget is not just a budget which stands in isolation this year, but reflects years of hard work and dedication by both this administration and our brilliant officers of East Cambs District Council. Therefore, Chairman, I'm delighted to second this budget. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Schumann. I now move to Councillor Bailey to sum up on the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think members of the public listening in the audience and perhaps online will just wonder what on earth is going on in this chamber when we're busy talking about Thurrock and Croydon and places that have absolutely nothing to do with East Cambridgeshire. We are no Thurrock. We are not facing 57% of revenue costs, revenue budget being spent in servicing debt. As I've constantly reiterated, we have no external debt. We don't have to spend any money servicing debt. In fact, we receive income from the exploits of our trading company. We receive interest into this council. That's one of the reasons it works so well. It supports delivery of our services. Councillor Christine Whelan talks about mismanagement, financial mismanagement. That's a really serious accusation. And yet the Liberal Democrats are quite happy to jump on the back of the record of financial management at this authority in suggesting a council tax freeze. You cannot suggest on the one hand that there's financial mismanagement going on, and the other hand, suggesting that it's okay not to start increasing council tax. It just doesn't sit together at all. The Lib Dems say that they want to freeze council tax. Well, right now on this vote is their opportunity to do that. Will they take it? I seriously doubt it, just because it's a Conservative budget that is before them. There is a time for council tax rises. We are not wedded to never increasing council tax. The time for raising council tax is when it's necessary. It has not been necessary because of the way that we've managed the authority, because of the good officers of senior management team, and frankly, every single officer here who works towards the values and the goals of this authority. It's not our obsession. What is our obsession is getting things done for our residents, and it's our financial management that allows us the ability to do that. And as Conservatives, if we are lucky enough to be returned as the administration, we will keep working to keep council tax low. I can't stand here and promise that we'll never increase council tax. That would be madness, but we will only do it as a last resort, and we will keep delivering great services. We will keep investing in community projects. The members opposite failed to support our 9 community projects, £2.3 million. They voted against them. Absolutely astonishing, great projects. And that's on top of 10 million that we've already spent on masses of community infrastructure projects across this district because of our financial competency. We spend money on trying to improve our lot with local transport options. We spent money on feasibility studies for active travel solutions. We're spending money on delivering Soham to Wicken Cycleway. The members opposite voted against that. Absolutely astonishing. We will continue to work to support our community land trusts across the district and encouraging those to come forward because they get the opportunity to own the affordable housing that they deliver and to keep it ring-fenced for people with the strongest ties to their community so that they can deliver to their own local housing need. That's a revolution across East Cambs. We're national leaders in that. It's a record to be proud of, and yet the members opposite have done every single thing they can to trash and destroy community land trusts across this authority. Absolutely disgraceful, disgraceful. And we are continuing to secure 100k homes for 100% freehold ownership across the district. It will be overtaken by First Homes, by the First Homes policy.
Councillor Trapp, is that a point of order?
Point of order there. The community land trusts have been supported. Where-
It's not a point.
We will continue
Bailey.
to invest money to support our housing and community advice team who do a fantastic job at supporting and giving advice and preventing homelessness. One of the very reasons we can offer a council tax freeze is because they are not hemorrhaging cash in having to put families in bed and breakfast accommodation, which so many authorities are spending millions and millions of pounds doing. We haven't spent any money on temporary bed and breakfast accommodation in this authority for many, many years because we work with people before they get into a crisis. That's to be applauded. It's good for council taxpayers, but it's fantastic for the families involved. And we're making significant investments into a cleaner, greener East Cambridgeshire. I'm incredibly proud of the record of delivery at this council. And you know, the fact that the Liberal Democrats wanted a council tax freeze shows that they know that we are financially competent and we are able to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. We now move to a recorded vote as is required under the Constitution. And what we voted on is in 2.1 of agenda item 13 to agree the formal council tax resolution as set out in Appendix 1, the draft revenue budget for 2023-24 and the MTFS for 2024-5 to 2026-27. The council tax freeze in 23-24, statement of reserves as set out in Appendix 3, the fees and charges as set out in Appendix 4, the capital strategy and financing as set out in Appendix 5, the extension of business rate reliefs as detailed in sections 6.6 to 6.10, and the discretionary element of the council tax support fund as detailed in paragraphs 11.9, 11.11. So over to you, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. When I call your name, can you say whether you're voting for, against or abstaining on the recommendations in 2.1? Councillor Christine Ambrose Smith.
For.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Councillor Sue Austin.
For.
Councillor Anna Bailey.
For.
Councillor Ian Bovingdon.
For.
Councillor David Brown.
For.
Councillor Charlotte Kane.
Against.
Councillor Lorna Dupre.
Against.
Councillor Lavinia Edwards. Councillor Liz Every.
For.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
For.
Councillor Simon Harries.
Against.
Councillor Julia Huffer.
For.
Councillor Bill Hunt.
For.
Councillor Mark Inskip.
Against.
Councillor Alec Jones.
Against.
Councillor Daniel Schumann.
For.
Councillor Joshua Schumann. Councillor Alan Sharp.
For.
Councillor John Trapp.
Against.
Councillor Paola Tramarco. Councillor Joe Webber.
For.
Councillor Christine Whelan.
Against.
Councillor Gareth Wilson.
Against.
So the motion is carried by 16 votes for to 8 against with no abstentions.
Thank you, Tracy. I now move on to item 14, which is the making in brackets adoption of the Swaff and Bulbeck neighbourhood plan. If I can ask Sally to introduce the paper, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
You have before you a copy of the Swaffham Bulbeck neighbourhood plan. At the recent referendum, 87% of votes cast were in support of the plan. So the final step in the process is for this council to formally make the Swaffham Bulbeck neighbourhood plan part of the development plan for East Cambridgeshire with immediate effect. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sally. Two things on this. I'm happy to propose this from the chair, but also if members after the meeting can hand this back, because the parish council are keen to get as many of the copies of these. So if you don't need them, please don't walk away with them. I think Councillor Trapp is happy to second that.
I'm happy to second.
And I'm sure all I'd like to do is congratulate the hard work from the Swaffham Bulbeck Parish Council and residents in achieving the neighbourhood plan. But over to you, Councillor Trapp.
Just want to say a few words. First of all, to thank you to Richard Kay for his help with the local plan, with the neighbourhood plan. And also it is actually a very difficult and very time-consuming operation. Those of you who've been involved in it, those of you who are involved, but I think it is worth it. My only sort of dancing is that actually 35 residents voted against it, and I'm so sorry that we didn't carry the whole village or the whole parish. But I think it is quite a remarkable achievement to actually get that many people voting on a very slight need for voting. So I'd recommend that we adopt this local plan.
Thank you, Councillor Trapp. Do I have any other speakers? And I'm sure that. Oh, Councillor Hunt, sorry, apologies.
Very briefly, Chair, and thank you. I think this is such a substantial work, and it's clear that a huge amount of effort has gone into it. But just to have one person saying it's wonderful is probably not enough. So there's a second person, and that's me. I think it really is quite outstanding, and the people of Swaffham Bulbeck certainly need congratulating and thanking for what they do for their community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And all I'd like to say, Councillor Harries, sorry.
I just want to put on the record for the second meeting in a row, my extreme pleasure at agreeing with Councillor Hunt. Totally endorse every word.
Thank you, Councillor Harries. It's great we're getting agreement across the chamber. I mean, to finish off, all I'd like to say is congratulate Swaffham Bulbeck Parish Council. And I believe the chairman is watching on this online, because I was being communicating with her earlier today. So I'd like to thank her for the hard work. And thank you, members, for unanimously agreeing that. Thank you.
Run of Councillor Harries and Councillor Hunt agreeing with other. Could we have a comfort break, please?
Sorry, I've got to turn the mic on. Apologies. Item 15 is the appointment of the board director for East Cambs Street Scene. And do we have a proposer
I'm happy to propose, Chair.
and a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any speakers on Councillor Kane?
I'm afraid I can't support this proposal. It's not because I have anything against the individual whatsoever. It's that I just don't understand how we think we can have proper governance of a trading company if we put the director of operations as a director of that company, our director of operations. When I asked an audit committee some concerns about ECSS and its very poor delivery of service in recent times, I was told that the delivery of the improvement plan will be monitored by the director operations. So the director operations is monitoring for this council whether or not ECSS is delivering the services to standard. And we're now proposing that the director of operations be a director of that self-same company. It's a nonsense and we shouldn't do it. We should have a clear separation. The person who is monitoring that company for this council to make sure that our residents are getting the services that they're paying for should not be the self-same person who is a director of that company. So I can't support this.
Thank you, councillor Kane. Are there any other speakers on this item? No, does the proposal, this is,
I have no such reservations and I'm more than happy to recommend Isabel Edgar to be appointed to the board. Thank you.
no comment, more comments.
Nothing to add.
Okay, in which case we move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation? And all those against the recommendation? All those abstaining? Okay. I think that's carried. So we will have a 5-minute adjournment for a comfort break and then we'll come back to item 16. Could we start to get back into our seats, please? Thank you. I think everybody's back in there. Oh, Dan's. I need to put these on to make sure I can see Karen with the thumbs up. So we are now streaming live again. Thank you. Thank you to members of the public and press who are watching online for our short comfort break. We now move on to item 16, which is the East Cam street scene management fee. And if I can ask Ian to introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As detailed in the report, ECSS board has requested an increase in management fee of up to £500,000 to recover the additional costs incurred by the company in 22-23, as detailed in sections 3.4 to 3.6 of the report. Council is asked to approve this increase in management fee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Do I have a proposer for Councillor Bailey? And do I have a seconder?
Sorry, Chair.
And you're reserving your right to speak?
You reserve my right to speak.
Okay, we do have an amendment, but I will ask Councillor Bailey to propose the recommendation, then I'll bring the amendment in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Our waste service happens to be in a company structure. It's financially beneficial for this council for it to be so, but beyond that, it is in the same position as other councils' waste services. The East Cam street scene budget has always been prepared with a minimal requirement for profit in order to keep costs to the council and taxpayers as low as possible. So it shouldn't come as any surprise that in the current exceptional financial climate, that costs have risen beyond that which the company can withstand on its own. Every council in the country has had increased costs for their waste collection service. Of course they have. Fuel's gone up, staff wages have gone up, parts and labour to service vehicles have gone up. I've looked at other Cambridgeshire councils. Guess what? They've also got increased costs. South Cambs District Council at the end of Q2 was reporting a significant budget increase, citing the overspend at end of Q2 relates to the operational running costs of the fleet, which is impacted by the volatility of the current market. The increase in the fuel prices have substantially affected shared waste and will potentially be further exacerbated by the current cost of living crisis. We are no different to any of the Cambridgeshire local authorities. These increases should not come as a shock to councillors. All councillors received a briefing from the Chief Executive about changes that were being made to the service. All councillors had access to the information that came to the Finance and Assets Committee last month, which included this information. Now, I haven't shied away from the fact that we had issues with our waste collection service last year, which arose from the very necessary round reconfiguration and were followed by very, very serious sickness issues, really serious sickness issues, individuals that are employed by the organisation. We've worked incredibly hard to overcome the problems and we've made significant new investment into the service, including a pay rise for the crews. There's definitely more to do. Collection of the waste of 40,000 households is a huge, relentless operation, but the service is recovering. We're building in better resilience and we're determined to get back to the gold standard that our residents deserve and have had up until last year. An East Cam street scene has gone well beyond the national NJC requirement on staff pay, and this is where East Cams is different to other councils in Cambridgeshire. As part of the incredibly well-managed agreement with the union, changes to terms and conditions which help to improve the running of the service have been recognised in staff pay that goes well beyond the national agreement. Although I was unable to check Cambridge City's pay levels, ECSS staff are now the highest paid in the rest of Cambridgeshire, particularly at the lower end of the pay scale, where they are paid thousands more. Staff have received the NJC award of 8%, plus an additional 6% for the first 6 months of this year, increasing to an additional 10% from last November under the local agreement. This means they're better paid than in other councils in Cambridgeshire. This council has a responsible and well-managed budget, one that is able to deal with the changes in year, and I believe the council has risen to the challenge of inflation incredibly well. There are no cuts to our services, quite the opposite. What you're seeing here is increased investment, both this year and in future budget years, but with no council tax rise and only a positive impact on services. So I wholly support this proposal for, increased costs to recognise those increased costs that East Cam Street Scene is receiving, just like every other waste service in the country.
Thank you, councillor Bailey. As I mentioned earlier, we have got an amendment which is proposed by councillor Kane, and the seconder is councillor Inskip. Now, members should have a copy of this on their table. So if I can ask councillor Kane to propose the amendment, I presume you're reserving the right to speak.
Yeah, I'll second
Councillor Inskip. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Kane, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was worried when I saw this cost increase, not so much by the increase, although the amount is bigger than I was expecting, because as Councillor Bailey says, it's been a difficult year with inflation, and quite rightly, the staff have been given a decent pay rise at long last in recognition of the hard work they do. But I was concerned that we hadn't seen any earlier indication that there were cost pressures coming through in the reports from ECSS or indeed from our observers at the board. And then I heard the answers to questions at the beginning of this meeting, and I am shocked, utterly shocked. We have heard a lot tonight about financial management. And there's been an accusation that we've suggested there's financial mismanagement, and that's a serious accusation. Well, let's just go through what we've heard tonight. Councillor Huffer was having to decide on the 14th of December whether or not to cancel the Operational Services Committee. And she wasn't aware of at the time that there was an overspend. But the Section 151 officer has told me it was apparent from the 1st of November that there was a significant overspend.
Councillor Huffer.
Point of clarification. I did not say I wasn't aware. I said the amount was up. We were not aware of the amount.
So the Section 151 officer has said that it was apparent from the 1st of November that there was a significant cost pressure. So there should have been a meeting of the committee to discuss that. Worse than that, we asked Councillor Huffer, other members asked Councillor Huffer, when she saw management accounts. And she says that it was for the meeting on the 31st of January was when the board first looked at management accounts. Did the board not notice that there were cost pressures? Did the board not ask to see management accounts? Did Councillor Huffer, as our observer on the board, not ask to see management accounts? How did the board decide that they could sign off the annual accounts stating that the company was a going concern when they knew there were significant cost pressures and they didn't have management accounts in front of them? This company is not being managed properly. Any board of directors will want to see regular management accounts, and especially in a year where there's a lot of cost pressures and where they've delivered a very large pay rise to their staff. I cannot believe that it's been this badly managed. And so this amendment is really important. It's saying, first of all, we give them a loan so that they can pay their bills, but we have chance to make sure that the company is being properly run, that it can deliver the services to the residents that they're supposed to get and are not getting at the moment, and that it's got its finances well managed. We're saying that it's the Director of Finance with the Chair of Finance who should agree that loan. We want the directors of ECSS to provide a written report to the Operational Services Committee at its next meeting and attend the meeting to answer questions to say why it took so long for them to report that they had financial issues and what they're doing to put controls in place to prevent a recurrence. We're asking the council's observers of the board to write a report for the audit committee and attend that meeting to answer questions, to explain why they didn't report the financial issues to members and what they plan to do in future to ensure such shareholder interests are protected. We're instructing the external auditors for ECSS to review the governance and controls in the company, detailing any weaknesses and recommendations for improvements so that we can deliver the agreed service levels on waste collection and street cleaning and sound financial management. We're asking the council's internal auditor to review the governance from ECDC of ECSS and ECTC to detail any weaknesses and recommendations for improvements. And we're requesting that the council's external auditor reviews the value for money from this approach to dealing with waste collection and street sweeping. We have seen a catalogue of failure of governance and financial management of this company, a catalogue of failure of our two observers on this company, and this needs to be addressed properly, and these are proper measures to allow this council to be sure that the services are going to be delivered and that there's adequate financial management at the company. And I recommend this amendment, and I'm going to ask for a recorded vote on it, because I can't believe that any responsible person will just roll over and say, hey, it's a 500k increase in this year and another 633k increase next year. Whew.
Okay, thank you, councillor Kane. Do I have any speakers on this amendment? Oh, Bill Hunt, councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I can see how seriously the people over there have taken this. They gave us this amendment at 5:51 this afternoon. Now, I know it's strictly okay, but it's excessively discourteous to hand out an amendment 9 minutes before the meeting starts. But then I thought about it a bit more, and I thought, well, they're not really serious. They're not taking it seriously. They're just trying to cause a bit of mischief and wave their arms around a bit and say, no, they wouldn't do it. And then I looked here and I thought, well, what are they trying to do? There's 7 paragraphs in this amendment. 5 of them require more bureaucracy, more time, more money, more reports, and more everything else, which of course, you know, the Liberal Democrats excel at that, don't they? Wasting money and taking up people's time and asking questions and distracting officers from their real work. And so that's what I think it must be. And I really, I think they should consider that these costs that we're talking about now are with a background of a balanced budget. And yes, things change. Circumstances are changing all the time with COVID and inflation and one thing and another. But a sensible organisation, and this is a sensible organisation, prepares for these possibilities and covers them. And that's what's being done here.
Thank you, councillor Hunt. Councillor Harries.
Just a couple of very quick comments. I sometimes reflect on what value a person like me actually brings to a council. I know others have reflected on that as well. The one thing that I would say is that I've spent my entire working life in and around very large organizations, very large, very tightly managed and governed organizations, and have become used to operating in a way that places governance front and center in everything you do. My concern about the previous agenda item shared by my colleagues was that it's a breach of good governance principles. And this item demonstrates the outcome of poor governance. Now, there is a fundamental problem with this organization, ECSS, which is that it's too small, so it lacks resilience. That is due to the way that it was set up many years ago, but that's done. You know, there's no point crying over spilt milk. It is small. It will be impacted by economic problems more than larger and more resilient organizations will be. We have no desire to see the people working in ECSS treated in any other than the best possible way. We value them. They do a great job, and we're delighted that they're being paid well. But the fact is that you must have been aware of these problems much earlier than was admitted. And one of the things that Councillor Bailey said in particular that very large investment had to be made. Yes, absolutely right. I believe that in previous years, we might have said one or two words about the large amount of investment that was needed and would continue to be needed. This is a budget item. It's not a big surprise. It's one of those things that you budget for. That needed to be honestly set down as part of the long-term planning for the organization. One of the great difficulties that we have in dealing with this entire issue is the fact that there is an assumption that the council will pay. The fallback is you can come to this budget meeting and you can ask for £500,000. You have a majority, you will get it. We all know that. You knew that last month, 3 months ago, 6 months ago. At the height of the problems, you knew that you could come to this meeting and ask for a grant to close the gap. There is no financial discipline on you. There is no management discipline. There is no governance discipline. The observers are people who are marking their own homework. We cannot have confidence in future management of this organization, not because we think people are behaving badly, not because we don't think they're sincere, not because we think they're not trying their best. Of course they are. But the structure is wrong. The governance is wrong. It cannot end well because you haven't set it up to succeed. And this will happen over and over again. Nobody believes we've seen the last of the cost of living problem, or that we aren't going to have economic headwinds for the next few years. You will be back dipping in the same pool, and there's no incentive for you to get your act together and be open and honest with us. And the points that Councillor Kane made about Councillor Huffer's quite extraordinary responses, can I just say, you would not last 30 seconds after having given an answer to like that to in any well-run, properly governed organization, not 30 seconds. And I think somewhere in your heart, you know it.
Thank you, Councillor Harries. I've got Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. I hadn't intended to speak in this debate, but I just need to say a few brief things. Firstly, that I would agree absolutely with those of my colleagues who have pointed out that the governance of these trading companies has been fundamentally wrong from the moment of their inception. And I made that point all the way through, and I hold to it to this day, and I am being proved right day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. But I want to point out two other things in response to what Councillor Hunt said. The first thing is the amazing arrogance of this administration. It tells us that asking questions is wasting officers' time, challenging is wasting officers' time, holding the administration to account is wasting officers' time. It is not. It is absolutely and fundamentally one of the key roles of this council is for the opposition, because your own backbenchers won't do it, to hold the administration to account. That is what we do. That is not only our right, it is the bedrock of democracy. The second point I wanted to make about Councillor Hunt's intervention was the complete lack of self-awareness, complaining that our amendment arrived on the table shortly before the meeting. That's not only technically right, I suppose, it is absolutely within the spirit of the council's rules of procedure and standing orders. And I will take no lessons at all from an administration which in this chamber in early 2019, halfway through a full council meeting, suddenly circulated an amendment which pulled completely 3 or 4 years of work and £1/3 million spent developing a local plan. If you're going to be prepared to dump an amendment on members halfway through an evening as the administration, then I'm not going to take any lessons from you in good governance or how to behave.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre. I've got Councillor Josh Schumann.
Thank you, Chair. When I think of this situation, reminds me of a teacher that I had many years ago called Jeff Wilson, who used to get his education department budget And as soon as he got it, he used to run to the bursar's office and bang his fists on the table and say, how on earth do you expect me to run a department on that budget? Knowing full well he could afford it, but was frightened that if he didn't do that, they'd reduce it the following year. This is flipping it on its head. And we've got a company that we give money to and keep lean by giving just enough money to in order to deliver fantastic service, as we've noted, one of the best waste services, certainly in the county, and so up there with the best waste services in the country. And we do that on a budget which is lean and well managed. That means that when there's fluctuation, that leanness hits that company. And instead of giving them too much money where that, you know, they may end up spending in areas which we didn't, we're less comfortable with, they come to us and we're in a position of saying, okay, we will finance those fluctuations. We do that not by observers being told behind closed doors at board meetings, not by observers then reporting back to audit committees, which is not particularly engaging to the public, but by coming to full council and making it clear to everybody that's watching and anybody that wants to engage with our meetings that this is what we're doing. How on earth that can be considered bad governance, I have no idea. This is governance being open, transparent, and absolutely open to everybody to understand and see exactly what we are doing. We are saying we are running a lean, efficient, well-managed company where the staff are being paid above what other staff in neighbouring authorities are, and still delivering fantastic service. But with that comes problems when there's fluctuations in variables which quite honestly are out of our control. Things like fuel prices, as we've seen. So this amendment basically tries to, in my opinion, put more decision-making and more oversight in the hands of fewer people and behind closed doors. This is not what we want. We want to be transparent and open and say, yes, there's challenges, and when there are challenges, we'll fund them. So therefore, I can't support this amendment and would hope that members opposite would be happy that we're prepared to say this in public. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Schumann. I've now got Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I cannot understand a company suddenly at the end of the financial year finding itself short of £500,000. Seems amazing to me. I would have thought that the well-managed company that we're assured exists knew, because this £500,000 didn't occur in December or January, it's occurred gradually over the whole year due to the fact that for factors we all knew about, like increasing the salaries to the workers, which is necessary to do, and the problems that we've had on this collecting rubbish. So surely we ought to have been told on a regular basis, look, we're a bit short. Perhaps we ought to be each quarter putting in extra 100,000 or something. You know, we ought to know about this thing, come along right at the end of the year and say, oh my goodness, what a big surprise. We suddenly got £500,000 short. Doesn't seem very reasonable to me, and it doesn't seem to be the sort of thing that a well-managed company would do. And therefore, all we're asking for is that people look into it and find out what happened, what went wrong. We know the reason for the increase. We know that we needed to spend the extra money. We're not saying that the money shouldn't go and be spent. We're just saying the system of reporting and the system of control needs to be tightened up. And we're asking internal auditors and external auditors to do their job properly and just to manage that and report back. That's not going to cost an arm and a leg. It's just improving the system of reporting so that members are told what's going to happen in plenty of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I've now got Councillor Trapp.
I shall be brief. Just to say that the oversight of the company, I'm afraid it does seem that we haven't had much oversight of this company. But also coming back to Councillor Schumann's comments about closed doors, may I mention that actually audit committee and operation services are not closed doors. That's where it should have happened. That's where it should have been brought to and actually investigated. So I don't think we have closed doors at all.
Thank you, councillor Trapp. I'm seeing no other speakers, in which case I'll go to councillor Inskip as the seconder of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Schumann says one of the best waste collection services in the country. I can only assume Councillor Schumann has been absent from East Cambridgeshire for long periods over the past year, because no other explanation would face it. How could he have missed week after week of unemptied bins lining our streets, of bags piled high, black bags on the curbside for day after day, unemptied? He clearly was distracted and somewhere else, because otherwise he would have seen and heard the complaint from residents who raised it, parish council meetings, it came up. Was he not at those meetings? Where was he? Now, management at a limited company is very different from management of a local authority, and yet this administration seems doomed to conflate those two separate legal entities. Imagine buying a car, hopefully an analogy that Councillor Hunt would understand. Imagine buying a car, and then at the end of the year, the manufacturer comes back to you and says, oh, sorry, it's cost significantly more than we thought. So, please give us, an extra bung of money just to cover the costs that we weren't aware of when we sold you the car, because that's exactly what's happened here. A price was agreed and what was payable. The administration makes the claim that that's allowed under the service level agreement. But if that was, we wouldn't be back here debating that and trying to get approval for additional sums. And it doesn't, and yet here we are with a request for an additional £500,000 in the penultimate month of the financial year. This is Conservative financial incompetence, if nothing else. The company must have known there was a problem much earlier in the financial year. Why was it not raised with the Operational Services Committee or Finance and Assets? And why was at that point the contract not renegotiated? Now, of course, private companies like to keep their difficulties away from the eyes of their customers. But when the directors and the observers of the board of the company are the customer, why aren't these problems being aired and resolved earlier? The report tells us about the contributing costs, staffing costs, maintenance for vehicles and fuel costs, staffing costs. Well, we know the bulk of the overtime was run up in the first half of the year. We know the pay rises were agreed back in October. We know that vehicle maintenance costs have been spread across the year. We know that fuel costs peaked in the first half of last year. And yet nothing at all came to the ECSS board until the 31st of January this year, by which time that overspend was at least £300,000, and now we're being asked for £500,000. And going back to that cancelled Operational Service Committee meeting, this is the email that I had. It said, "Dear Councillor Inskip, I've asked service leads for further agenda items for the January Operational Services meeting. However, there are no additional items. I've also received notice that the Operational Services budget will not be ready due to the timing of the meeting." Interesting, that one. "And therefore that the agenda will only contain 3 items for noting. Having consulted the chair, I'm cancelling the meeting." So either the chair didn't know about the underspend or didn't feel it was important to raise it to Operational Services. Has to be one or the other of those. If this was an independent company, there'd be no question of simply paying over £500,000. The company would need to renegotiate, and that's with future contracts, not previous contracts. The failing of the company needs to be recognised, and the failing of the management and the oversight of that company brings us where we are today. We shouldn't just be signing this off and going ahead without the provisions that are captured in this amendment. We need to have careful, good management and financial discipline. We need to have a good understanding as to why we've ended up in this situation. The company may struggle to survive if we don't find a way of supporting it through recovery, but that doesn't mean we just unquestionably hand over £500,000 of taxpayers' money that we're raising that could have been spent on other services. That's what we're That's where that discipline comes in. Instead, our approach, we want to see this managed in a commercial way. We want to deal with those management failings because we don't want to hand more taxpayers' money across to
Councillor
a
Inskip.
company that is failing year after year.
Thank you, councillor Inskip. I've got councillor Bailey now to sum up on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Frankly, I think the only person that's been absent from this authority is former Liberal Democrat councillor Downey, quite honestly. Chairman, this is a complete and utter nonsense, this amendment. Councillor Harries said we should have budgeted for this. Did Councillor Harries have some sort of second sight that the rest of us didn't have? Did Councillor Harries know that there was going to be a 12% inflation that waste services across the country were facing? Perhaps he could have told us this and we could have budgeted for it at the beginning. Chairman, the Liberal Democrats did not put an amendment in their budget amendment to deal with this. The increase that we are dealing with here is built into the budget. If the Liberal Democrats wanted to recognise this situation and they wanted to deal with it differently, they needed to recognise that in their budget amendment. The Liberal Democrats, by ignoring it in their budget amendment, have effectively accepted the fact that there are increases in our medium-term financial strategy by their very lack of an amendment. To suggest that East Cam Street Scene will have a one-year loan of up to £500,000, Chairman, is a total nonsense. It's a total misunderstanding of the relationship between East Cambs District Council and East Cam Street Scene. Firstly, East Cam Street Scene would be required to repay a commercial rate of interest. Where on earth are they going to pay the interest charges on having a £500,000 loan? Where do they think that money is coming from? Who is paying that? East Cam Street Scene does not have reserves. It does not have money sitting in coffers waiting to service debt at a commercial rate of interest. This is a complete and utter nonsense. How do the opposition members think that East Cam Street Scene can pay down capital of £500,000? You know perfectly well that East Cam Street Scene has not been set up to make a profit. How on earth do they think that they're going to make capital repayments? They've put no proposal for that in this amendment here today. No proposal to deal with how the capital would be refunded or how the debt payments the interest payments would be serviced. Our waste service happens to be in a structure that is a trading company. It is financially beneficial for this council for it to be so. But beyond that, it is in the same position as other councils' waste services. Is South Cambs District Council loaning money to its waste service to deal with its overspend? No. It's dealing with the overspend by increasing funding to its waste service. We are doing the same. Councillor Schumann makes a very good point in talking about transparency. Here we are having a discussion about the fact that there's been increased costs to our waste service. I don't think any other councils are having those discussions, but they are all suffering increased costs to their waste service. It's buried in their council budget papers. Ours is on display because we run a trading company which is financially beneficial to this organisation, to the council, to taxpayers to do so. There's no poor governance here. There are simply increased costs arising from exceptional financial circumstances. These costs are being met in year and in future years with our budget. This amendment would immediately plunge the company into immediate financial crisis because it would immediately be unable to service the debt interest payments. It would be unable to make capital repayments. What would you have the trading company do? All it can do is come back to its 100% shareholder, who it has a contract with to deliver the waste service. And the shareholder would need to say, yes, increasing costs, fuel cost rises, staff cost rises, labour cost rises, maintenance cost rises, all need to be paid for, and it would increase the fee. What is the point in plunging East Cam Street Scene into financial crisis? Absolutely ridiculous, complete misunderstanding of how the interaction works between the trading company and the district council. The alternative. So the Liberal Democrats who hope to be in charge, I really hope they're not in May, presumably they'll scrap East Cam Street Scene. Or they might start allowing the company to make a profit. So allow the company to make a profit, charge the council a greater management fee, and then they've got some profit sitting in their bank account. All that does is puts up the price it put it in a false way, and it does nothing at all to run an efficient waste service. So the only people that have to pay for the cost increases is the council. But we're not charging our residents for that. We're not increasing council tax. We're running a financially responsible budget that is able to withstand this increase in costs that are truly exceptional, just like, well, frankly, not like the other councils, because the other councils are increasing council tax. South Cambs has raised its council tax by the maximum allowed today. Other waste authorities are raising their council tax by the maximum to pay in part for their cost overruns on their waste service. We aren't doing that. This is a success story. There is more work to do with East Cam Street Scene and the waste contract, a lot more work, and we will get it back to where it should be, which is where it always was, running a fantastic service for our residents, and we will get there.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. We now move to the vote, and we've had a request for a recorded vote on this. So we are voting on the amendment, which is on your tables. So if I can ask Tracy to take the roll call.
Thank you, Chairman. So you're voting on the amendment. Can you indicate whether you're voting for, against or abstaining? Councillor Christine Ambrose Smith.
Against.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
Against.
Councillor Sue Austin. Councillor Anna Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Ian Bobbington.
Against.
Councillor David Brown.
Against.
Councillor Charlotte Kane.
For.
Councillor Lorna Dupre.
For.
Councillor Lavinia Edwards. Councillor Liz Every.
Against.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Against.
Councillor Simon Harries.
For.
Councillor Julia Huffer.
Against.
Councillor Bill Hunt.
Against.
Councillor Mark Inskip.
For.
Councillor Alec Jones.
For.
Councillor Daniel Schumann.
Against.
Councillor Joshua Schumann.
Against.
Councillor Alan Sharp.
Against.
Councillor John Trapp.
For.
Councillor Paola Trimarco. Councillor Joe Webber.
Against.
Councillor Christine Whelan.
For.
Councillor Gareth Wilson.
For.
So the amendment is lost by 8 votes to 16 with no abstentions.
Thank you, Tracy. So we now move to the debate on the main motion. Do I have any speakers on the main motion? Councillor Harries, just before Councillor Kane. Yeah.
I really just wanted to add a couple of very short comments on what I said earlier. So just to summarise, something Councillor Inskip said, a district council and a limited company are different entities with different kind of rules. We must be aware of that. What works for a district council does not necessarily work for a limited company. And I would like to think that everybody is extremely clear about these differences. The second point is denial is a very bad habit. One of the issues that we had last year with the entire ECSS problem was the level of denial, the automatic defensiveness, the inability and unwillingness to open up. And we've heard this from Councillor Bailey again. If there were prizes for bluster, heaven knows she would win a gold medal every year. There's a kind of shamelessness about this that is very alarming. Third point, something that I make no apologies for coming back to, you have to get the structure of an organization right. You have to get its governance right. You can't do anything if you don't set up the structure properly. Personally, I think the structure is flawed. I don't think anybody wants to see the most dramatic changes. We don't want to sweep everything away, but we would certainly like the opportunity to scrutinize the structure of the organization and see what we can do to improve it. It's not a black and white situation here, but it can be optimized. The final point, I hesitate to do this, but I found myself thinking of the last two lines of a poem, a very famous poem by Stevie Smith, as I hear the Conservative administration continuously defending the indefensible. The last two lines are, I was much too far out all my life and not waving, but drowning. I feel that you are drowning as you try to defend yourselves. You're treading water, and I feel nothing but compassion for you. But down you're going to go unless you change your ways. That's my view.
Okay, thank you, councillor Harries. I've got councillor Kane next.
Thank you, Chairman. I should like a recorded vote on this as well, please. I just can't believe that we have heard tonight from our observers at the board that the board has not been receiving and reviewing regular management accounts. They have not been receiving and reviewing regular management accounts. That's a big red flag to me that this company is not being financially managed. How can it be if the board and our observers are not seeing the management accounts, the in-year accounts that tell them what is going on, that would have let them see, as Councillor Harris said, that things were going wrong, that the prices were going up, would have let them talk about how they were going to address that, whether there were any mitigating actions or whether they were going to have to come to this council early in the financial year to ask us if we would be willing to pay more money. And on top of this, they weren't even delivering the service. They're still not delivering the service. And I find it stunning that anyone is happy to vote for a recommendation that just says, let's give them an extra £500,000 and let's leave it to the finance director. Nothing else needs to be done. We don't need to ask to see management accounts. We don't need to ask our observers what on earth they thought they were doing, not seeing management accounts, not bringing the information to this council. What is the point of having observers if they don't tell us what's going on with the finances of the company? It is utterly shocking, and I cannot believe that anyone is willing to vote for such a complacent recommendation when this company is not delivering the services, has told us in February that they need an extra £500,000 this year and they need an extra 633,000 next year. How can we possibly just say yes, all right, without asking at least for some idea of how they're going to manage things better? Even if they just read some management accounts occasionally, it might help. I'm voting against it, and I think everybody should.
Thank you, councillor Kane. I've got councillor Hunt next.
Thank you, Chair. I take very seriously what the opposition over there promote as facts, and when somebody says, well, you know, a business is not being run properly, or this service isn't right, or this is irresponsible, I at least think about it and rack my mind and make my mind up. And before we get involved, what's just come to mind is that Councillor Kane has said that Street Scene don't do a good service. And then I just went backwards about a quarter of an hour. And I remember Councillor Inskip saying that wheelie bins were piled up everywhere and making quite a fuss about it. I think he must have been referring to the time when I had 2 wheelie bins outside my house. He came round and photographed them and stuck them in the Ely Standard and used it as evidence to say that the wheelie bins were piled up everywhere. When I asked him why he'd been doing in my driveway, photographing my wins, he said it was coincidental. Well, there's something like 10,000 houses in Ely, and he picked mine. So I put a lot of weight on what the Liberal Democrats have to say. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Chair. I've got photographs from across the district, a large number of streets. It's just that I think the reporter chose Councillor Hunt's property, but Councillor Hunt should be aware that ECSS weren't just picking on him, but they have problems across the district.
Second.
I'm seeing no more speakers who are asking to speak, in which case I go to the seconder of the motion, councillor Huffer.
Thank you, Chair. We have never shied away from the fact that there were issues with street scene from April through to June, July. We've never shied away from that. We've always been completely upfront and honest about it. The problems have resolved by and large. We are now running a much more efficient and more like the gold service that we have as residents have all been used to. There are still areas that need working on and they are being addressed. Now, if Councillor Kane would like to attend the operational services meeting on March the 27th, I'd be very interested to see your input from or your observations after that meeting. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, councillor Huffer. I now move to councillor Bailey to sum up the
Thank
recommendation.
you very much. And I can absolutely confirm that councillor Inskip photographed other properties because he was seen lurking outside my property, photographing my house as well. So there we are. The reality
Point of
is,
personal information, it is on my route on the way into the council offices, so it's rather easy to stop and take a picture.
the reality is that if we don't agree this £500,000 up to £500,000 facility increase to East Cam Street Scene to run the service, if we do not fund East Cam Street Scene, there will be no waste service. And then councillor Inskip can be out with his photography again, photographing everybody's houses because the bins will not be collected. That is what the Liberal Democrats will be doing when they vote against this paper this evening. That is the reality. If we don't fund this, there will be no waste collection service. That's where we're at. Is that what the Lib Dems really want? No waste service for our residents, because that is what they are basically doing by voting against this funding for East Cam Street Scene. The cost increases are built into our current budget. They're built into future years' budgets. We're not increasing council tax to do this. And this is just like every other council in Cambridgeshire, and I would imagine every other council in the country that is runs a waste collection service. They all have increased costs. They will all have had to deal with that in year. They're all having to produce a balanced budget. They will all be increasing their funds for their waste collection service. We are absolutely no different. The only point of difference is that we have increased our staff salaries beyond the national collective agreement. And we did that for very good reason, because we were changing staff terms and conditions in order to make improvements to the waste collection service, so that we've now got collective round and task and finish instead of round specific task and finish. And that is a significant improvement. So I just say again to finish, if you vote against this paper today, you are voting for no waste service at all.
Thank you, councillor Bailey. We now move to the vote, and we've had a request for a recorded vote on this. So we are voting on the recommendation on 2.1 to approve an additional one-off management fee payment to ECSS in 22-23 of up to £500,000, and to authorise the Director of Finance to make the payment of up to £500,000 based on an open book accounting approach at the end of the financial year. So if I can ask Tracy to take the vote, please.
Thank you, Chairman. When I call your name, can you say whether you're voting for, against or abstaining on the recommendation in the report? Councillor Christine Ambrose Smith.
For.
Councillor David Ambrose Smith.
For.
Councillor Sue Austin.
For.
Councillor Anna Bailey.
For.
Councillor Ian Bovingdon.
For.
Councillor David Brown.
For.
Councillor Charlotte Kane.
Against.
Councillor Lorna Dupre.
Against.
Councillor Lavinia Edwards. Councillor Liz Every.
For.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
For.
Councillor Simon Harries.
Against.
Councillor Julia Huffer.
For.
Councillor Bill Hunt.
For.
Councillor Mark Inskip.
Against.
Councillor Alec Jones.
Against.
Councillor Daniel Schumann.
For.
Councillor Joshua Schumann. Councillor Alan Sharp.
For.
Councillor John Trapp.
Yes.
Councillor Paola Trimarco. Councillor Joe Webber,
For.
Councillor Christine Whelan,
Against.
Councillor Gareth Wilson.
Against.
So the motion is carried by 16 votes to 8 with no abstentions.
Thank you, Tracy. We now move on to item 17, which is the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority Update Report. You've got item A, which is the minutes and reports from the Audit and Governance Committee in September and December, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in October and November, and the Combined Authority Board in October and November. Are there any questions of our representatives on that? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a question to Councillor Bailey, who I believe is our representative on the Combined Authority Board. Can the leader of the council please tell us what led to the Combined Authority deciding to charge a mayoral precept for the first time to every household in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough? Thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hunt, for your question. So yeah, for the first time ever, CPCA was, the Combined Authority was facing a budget gap of 3.6 million in its running costs in the run up to the setting of the budget at the end of January. That was mainly, but not wholly, due to the saving of the ACTS Stagecoach bus services, which happened in the previous year. The situation could and it should have been avoided. The Combined Authority is the only mayoral combined authority which received no government funding in the announcements in spring last year for bus service improvements. Other mayoral combined authorities received a share of £5.7 billion. The lowest award was North of Tyne, which got £163.5 million. The highest was Greater Manchester, which got £1.173 billion. But government is withholding funds from the CPCA until it has addressed the issues cited in the Ernst & Young letter relating to governance and conduct of key individuals in the Mayor's office. At the budget meeting, Mayor Nick Johnson tabled his budget via a statement sent to the meeting, and he proposed to levy a mayoral precept for the first time ever, adding an additional line on every council tax bill in the county. Conservatives tabled a perfectly reasonable amendment that deleted the need for a mayoral precept. Much has been made on social media about that amendment. The truth is this: at the same meeting, a new bus framework was agreed. This document, voted on by everybody, set the level of public subsidy for bus services at £12 per passenger journey, £24 for a return. The average cost of the 10 most expensive subsidised bus services, none of which was in East Cambs, none of which were the ACTS Stagecoach routes, was a whopping £87.52 per return journey. According to the report from officers, the most expensive service, which Lib Dem and Labour members voted to retain, costs the public purse a staggering £256.43 per return passenger journey, and was only being used on average for one return journey per day. It was impossible to have a sensible conversation about the responsible spending of taxpayers' money. Lib Dems and Labour voted to retain these unsustainable services and to delay making any decisions on bus service improvements until the autumn. It was supposed to be happening in March. So hard-pressed East Cambs residents are now paying these ludicrous sums of money to support unsustainable bus routes. I totally support bus services. No other district council has done the work that we've done on pushing for improvements, but no one can justify spending £256 of public money for one return journey. It's completely reckless. Hard-pressed East Cambs residents are also now paying for another decision that was made. Conservatives proposed deleting the Cambridge City Council Cambridge Capital of Culture project. Cambridge City Council, by its own admission, cannot resource this project. And yet the Liberal Democrat and Labour members at the Combined Authority chose to leave £156,000 in the revenue budget for this project and to make East Cambs residents pay for it with a new layer of council tax. Utterly appalling. It's utterly typical of this totally dysfunctional organisation that breaches governance regularly, that cannot keep hold of staff, and that has been placed in special measures by the government, although we're not apparently allowed to call it that, but that is what it is. Residents should not be having to pay for the failure of the Mayor, and yet, thanks to the Liberal Democrat and Labour members at the Combined Authority Board, that is exactly what is happening, unfortunately.
Thank you, councillor Bailey. Are there any more questions on 17B either? No, in which case we move that the end of the public part of the meeting. So thank you to those members of the press and public who are watching online. We now need to vote on the motion that the press and public be excluded during the consideration of the following agenda item, because it is likely in the view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings that if members of the public were present during the item, there would be disclosure and exempt information of categories 3 and 4 of Part 1, Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act. So all members in favour of passing that motion? Thank you, members. So we just hold. Against, or is everybody by default agreeing with that? Okay, thank you. If I can ask